Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I would like to call this meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. And before we begin, I would like to welcome a new committee member, Gabe Desmond from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. Welcome, Gabe. We're glad to have you here. As a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who could not join us in person today and is also being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn on your microphones before speaking so that those online and in the room can hear you. Please also remember to state your name before speaking. It's helpful for people joining virtually. And before we get started, the Transportation Committee has received a request from Amy Reinell with the Active Transportation Alliance to participate remotely in this meeting. They've made this request in compliance with the requirements of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. This request requires a majority of vote by this body as a voice vote. So at this time, could all those in favor please say aye? Those not in favor say nay. Voice vote passes. And I would also like to ask committee members at the table at this time to introduce themselves. And I will start. My name is Tara Orban, and I am representing Cook County.
Scott Hennings, representing McHenry County.
Mary Nichols, CDOT.
Megan Swanson, Planning, IDOT.
John Paul Depla, FHWA.
Christina Kupkaski, Will County.
Gretchen Klock, Kendall County.
Scott Weber, Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Audrey Wenning, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Heather Mullins, Regional Transportation Authority.
Lynette Civarella, Metra.
Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Heidi Files, Kane County.
John Loper, DuPage County.
Mike Clemens, Lake County.
Mark Kane, FTA. Gabe Desmond, Illinois EPA.
Henry Giroux, Illinois Tollway.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
Steve Schilke, IDOT Region 1.
Chuck Abraham, IDOT YPI.
Vicki Barrett, CMAP.
And we did skip over one important person.
Well, not that important, but Bill Barnes, CMAP.
Welcome, Bill. Okay, on to agenda item number 2, agenda changes and announcement. There are no agenda changes requested. Are there any at this time from the committee? Seeing none, on behalf of the Transportation Committee, I would like to take a moment to congratulate the CTA on the groundbreaking today for the Red Line extension. Jen, would you like to share anything with the committee about this exciting event that will take place later today?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to mention it. So today is a historic day. We don't do these things very often, rail line extensions. The last time was 1987, I think, that we had a groundbreaking. And if you remember 1987, you're as surprised as I am that that was nearly 40 years ago. So it was many years in the planning, the Red Line extension. I have colleagues, not me directly, but I have colleagues who have labored on this project for 20 years at least, I think. So it is really an amazing day for us and for the region as well. For those of you who aren't familiar with the project, it is a 5.5 mile rail extension from 95th Red Line all the way to 130th. That will make the Red Line touch the north and south boundaries of the city of Chicago, which is a promise that was made, I don't know, 6 decades ago, I think is what we're saying now. So we're incredibly proud to be able to start fulfilling that promise. And everyone here should be as well as a region. There will be 4 stations fully accessible, of course, 103rd, 111th, Michigan near 116th, and then 130th, as well as a full modern rail yard at 130th as well. And I just wanted to say, right, all big transformative projects are bumpy and expensive, and there's always a reason to say no to them. So I think we should celebrate that as a region, we've found a way to make our way all the way to yes for this project. It's a win for equity and sustainability and affordable mobility and accessibility as well, right? So also you're all invited Thanks to this committee for all the tip amendments along the way that helped make this project happen. It's at 12:30. It's at Michigan and 115th, and you can talk to me afterwards if you're interested in going. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, this has been a project that has been discussed many times at the committee, not just on tip amendments, but updates as well. So congratulations again to the CTA on this momentous occasion. Do we have any other announcements from committee members? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3. We have before us the draft minutes from our February 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes as presented, please? All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Will County.
Okay, first from Chuck and a second from Christina. Thank you. The motion is seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes as proposed? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We are moving on to CMAP updates from Bill Barnes.
Thanks, Chair Orban. I'm sure you've recognized that I am not Amy Lee. I am Bill Barnes, the Deputy of Regional Policy and Implementation at CMAP, and I'm taking Amy's place for the purpose of this meeting. Before I get into updates, I just want to recognize again Gabe, our new representative. Was wondering, I'm going to put you on the spot. Any short words that you might have just to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. Gabe Desmond, Illinois EPA. Joined the EPA about 9 months ago and have been the alternate for Jack up until now, and now taken over permanently. Yeah, background is in government, started in local government, worked at FTA for a little while, and now here out in Illinois. So done city, state, and federal, and I'm really passionate about public service and transportation, and excited to be part of this and helping Chicago region get where it needs to go. So thanks.
Thanks, Gabe. All right, so I have CMAP updates, and they are hefty. So my request is just sit back and relax and let this just wash over you. Got a lot to report out on. So starting off, IDOT is preparing for the next cycle of ITEP, Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, which supports projects that expand travel options and enhance quality of life, such as trails, sidewalks, streetscapes, and their improvements. To help communities get ready, IDOT is hosting a training this May with 3 sessions scheduled across the region. They're going to walk through the program updates, application requirements, and best practices to make your applications more competitive. Trainings are in Orland Park, Schaumburg, and Woodstock, meaning that they're going to be accessible by folks all around the region. CMAP encourages local governments and their partners to attend and begin preparing for the upcoming funding opportunity. More information and registration details are available on IDOT's website. Next, CMAP has shared in the past that we've completed the phase 1 of the My Daily Travel Household Survey, and the data subset is now available on CMAP's data portal. The survey, as you may recall, collects information on how residents across Northeastern Illinois travel and is a key input for CMAP's regional travel demand modeling and planning. Phase 1 was conducted between September 24 and June of 25 and includes responses from more than 3,500 households across the region. As the first household travel survey since 2019, this is important because it gives us an early look at how travel behavior has changed since before the pandemic. So how does it look? Well, we answered that question with a summary and analysis of the phase 1 data set, which has found relatively stable travel patterns overall, alongside emerging post-pandemic shifts, which unsurprisingly show increased midday travel, elevated telecommute, and longer average trip lengths. Additional survey data collection will pick up this fall and continue into 27. That survey that I referenced, or excuse me, the summary of the survey is available on our website. And as you've heard in past presentations, CMAP has finalized the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, or TRIP. This is a first of its kind plan for the region. It identifies vulnerabilities in the regional transportation system and highlights how to make it more resilient to extreme weather and climate change. The plan identifies two types of resilience strategy, both a suite of project-specific strategies that will increase flood and heat resilience and organizational strategies that CMAP and its partner agencies can adopt to embed resilience into common decision-making practices. It also lists 64 priority projects identified by partner agencies and evaluated by CMAP in an effort to prioritize investments that increase system resilience. The plan was submitted to FHWA for determination that it meets the minimum requirements for a resilience improvement plan under the PROTECT program. We're already in contact with the sponsors of the priority projects, and once FHWA makes their determination, we will reach out to them to determine next steps. CMAP recently published an analysis of the governor's proposed fiscal year 27 state budget, which is available on our website. This first release highlights early takeaways and potential implications for the region, with a second, more detailed analysis to follow as the budget process advances and as we get closer to the end of the session. Switching now to safety, USDOT has released the fiscal year 26 NOFO for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, and this supports efforts to reduce roadway fatalities and serious injuries. This is the final year of funding under the current program, with approximately $1 billion available nationwide. Northeastern Illinois is competitive for this money because, as you know, 6 countywide safety action plans have been completed, and that positions most of our counties and most of our municipalities to be competitive for this funding opportunity. Communities with an adopted safety action plan are eligible to apply for implementation grants to advance priority projects and strategies identified in those plans. Additional planning and demonstration grants are also available to support action plan development, updates, and safety pilot projects. Applications are due May 26 of this year, and we encourage eligible local and county partners to apply. If you have any questions or need some extra guidance, please reach out to Vicki Barrett on our CMAP team. Turning now to patting ourselves on the back, CMAP recently received a Granicus Digital Government Award for Community Engagement for our Safe Travel for All initiative. The initiative's regional engagement blended bilingual content, county-specific hubs, and hotspot mapping to elevate lived experiences into safety design priorities. CMAP transformed thousands of insights into county safety action plans with its model of community-centered planning that brings residents and decision makers together for a common purpose. This recognition reflects CMAP's continued commitment to inclusive, data-driven engagement that supports safer transportation outcomes. The 2026 Technical Assistance Call for Projects closed last Friday at noon. CMAP and the RTA once again partnered on the joint application to make it easier for communities to seek planning and implementation support aligned with the On to 2050 and Transit is the Answer plans. This year's call included a new category of CMAP assistance, node-oriented development plans. This offering supports communities in strengthening key activity centers such as employment nodes, medical districts, campuses, or downtowns through integrated land use, mobility, and economic strategies. I'm excited to see the applications that came in and the awards that we make on that. Between CMAP and the RTA, we received a total of 54 applications. That's 54 applications from 46 different applicants. Over the next several weeks, our team will review the submissions, conduct follow-up interviews as needed, and prepare award recommendations, which will be announced in early June. CMAP is engaged with stakeholders across the region to shape the Century Plan. Together, we will explore how to build capacity, organize for impact, and work together to build a better, stronger future. We've already held 3 high-energy Catalyst Series events thus far, one on housing, one on land use and industrial development, and the other celebrating the adoption of the Climate Action Plan, which you'll be hearing about later today. CMAP is also meeting with each of the region's councils of governments to collaborate with local elected officials on the Century Plan. Throughout the rest of this year, we will convene stakeholders from across governments, business, civic, academia, and philanthropic spheres to help us develop the plan. All of this input will help identify the grand challenges that require regional action. We'll continue to keep you informed around this, and we target adoption of the plan by the MPO Policy Committee and our board next fall. CMAP is now accepting applications for the 2026 Future Leaders in Planning, or FLIP, summer program. This is the 17th year that we've offered this free program, which invites high school students from across northeastern Illinois to learn about planning and help shape ideas for our region. Applications are due May 1 and can be submitted on our website. Finally, a little just agenda preview. We've got 2 informational items that are coming to you, which are very exciting for us at CMAP. First is a presentation on the recently adopted Comprehensive Climate Action Plan for Greater Chicago. This is the region's first cross-state framework to reduce emissions and strengthen resilience across all major sectors, including transportation. We're also going to receive an update on the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan, something near and dear to all of you, with a focus on its analysis and financial planning. Staff will highlight findings from the ongoing financial risk assessment and discuss next steps related to reasonably expected revenues, including our recent work studying transitioning the motor fuel tax to a road usage charge. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Okay. Back to you, Chair.
All right, thanks, Bill, for the update. Congratulations again to CMAP on the award. And that update was so substantive because I think there's a lot of funding opportunities, not only for committee participants here, but also the communities in northeastern Illinois. So lots of money out there to be had for many of our capital needs. So at this time, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, and Russ is at the podium and ready to talk about the FY 23 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Good morning, Russ.
Hey, good morning. Included in your packet today are the 90 formal tip changes shown on Plan Revision 26-05 and the 267 tip changes shown on Administrative Plan Revisions 2605.1 and 2605.2. As shown in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of $376.7 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. A few highlights. The City of Chicago is replacing 4 bridges over the Calumet River and added about $130 million in federal, state, and local funds to the project as scoping and design elements have become more defined. PACE was awarded $39.78 million in low and no emission grant funding to purchase new hybrid buses from FTA and has added those funds to the tip. And IDOT has a multifaceted project in the south suburbs on Illinois 83 that is resurfacing, modernizing traffic signals, making ADA improvements, and bridge repairs, for which they added $21.5 million to the tip in this cycle. Administrative plan revisions increased total cost by $52.9 million to the tip in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for total costs in the tip from all plan revisions resulted in $429.6 million being added to the tip in prior, current, and future years. Project phases moving into and out of the tip years comprised most of the formal changes, while administrative changes were primarily AC and ACC related. Accounting for the plan revisions presented to you today, the tip remains physically constrained. The plan revision was posted on April 17th for committee and public review. Approval of formal tip plan revision 26-05 is requested, and after the motion has been made, if there are any questions, I can answer them at that time.
Thanks, Russ. I will entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 26-05. Thank you, Henry. Do I have a second?
DuPage.
Thanks, John. The motion is seconded. Are there any questions about this tip amendment? Audrey.
Yeah, hi. This is Audrey with the Metropolitan Planning Council. I just had a question about 2 projects. One is the one that Russell mentioned the Calumet River bridges. There's one bridge over at 92nd Street. Actually, there's of the four, we wanted to understand if bike lanes will be continuous across the bridges. They are now striped and they merge with traffic on the bridges. So we wanted to understand if how the bike facilities will be treated on the bridges.
And we have CDOT here, so CDOT would like to field that question.
Hi, Audrey.
Hi.
Mary with CDOT. I can get back to you on the specific design.
Okay. And then I had one other question. A project, road modernization project, sponsored by Kane and Kendall, reconstruction of the Douglas Road between Kirk and Radant Roads. There's a continuous sidewalk that will be installed and an off-street bike path on the other side. But we wondered, the bike facility seems isolated from the broader bicycle network and is surrounded by warehouse uses. How will this bicycle facility be integrated with the regional bike network?
You have a representative from Kane? We do have a representative from Kane, so there you go, Heidi.
Hi, Heidi Files from Kane County. And I also have Gretchen here, who's our bike ped planner. You said the Douglas Road at Kirk intersection improvements, correct?
Between Kirk and Radant, yeah.
So that project is actually by the city of Batavia and Aldi, a private entity who actually was awarded the EDP funds, right?
I think this is a different project. Batavia has a few projects in that area.
Okay.
And I believe that they're referencing their bike plan on that. So there is multiple projects in that area that might connect to, but I can follow up with more information because that's a city-led project,
Okay.
not a Kendall.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, all those in favor of approving tip amendment 2605?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Well, now we're moving on to the fun stuff that Bill mentioned earlier. It wouldn't be a 2026 Transportation Committee meeting without our regional transportation plan team. So today we're going to hear from Julie, Elizabeth, Danielle, and Nick about the RTP activities, including the financial plan risk assessment and a policy report on the road usage charge. So it looks like you're going first, Julie. Welcome. Good to see you, and we look forward to this update.
Thank you. Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Julie Reschke. I'm a senior policy analyst with CMAP. Today's presentation will largely focus on research and analysis completed through the RTP's financial plan. But before we get into that very insightful content, I'm here to provide some high-level updates about the RTP's overall development. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we're reaching the tail end of the RTP's development process. Following the board and MPO policy committee's review of the proposed list of constrained regional capital projects in March, CMAP began the federally required analyses pertaining to non-discrimination and air quality conformity. These analyses will continue throughout the spring in preparation for the scheduled vote on the RTP's adoption this fall. At your next meeting, I'm excited to say that we will return with a draft RTP and set of appendices. Following that Transportation Committee meeting, the drafts will go to the CMAP Board and MPO Policy Committee for a vote to officially begin the public comment period, which is anticipated to start on June 11th. We've greatly appreciated collaborating with this committee throughout the RTP development process, and we look forward to your feedback on the draft plan in the coming months. And with that, I will turn it over to the financial plan team.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Ginsburg. I'm a senior analyst with RPI, and my pronouns are she, her. You haven't heard from us in a few months, so we're here with a lot for you today, and I hope it's interesting.
Hey, Elizabeth, we haven't heard from you in a while, but we're also not hearing much. Can you speak a little bit louder? Thank you.
Of course, I always got to do the podium thing. All right, next slide. So the last time we presented the fiscal constraint to you was in December of last year. We have made a few updates and kind of tweaked some of our methodologies. So compared to the $569 billion fiscal constraint we presented in December, we now have a balanced $573 billion fiscal constraint. Mostly we updated some of our revenue forecasts and were able to account for some additional costs. At the same time, at $510 billion, the cost to operate, maintain, and improve the existing system is still greater than the baseline revenues that we have available, which sets us up for the presentations this morning. Next slide. As Bill and others have mentioned, we're here this morning with an update on the financial plan risk assessment. You've seen this slide before, but I just wanted to remind you, kind of give an overview of what that exercise includes. In all of the modeling that we've done for the financial plan, we had to make a variety of assumptions about things like inflation, project timelines, and et cetera. And we have to make sure that we're not being overly optimistic or overly pessimistic in those assumptions. At the same time, projecting these costs into the future is fundamentally uncertain, and understanding where risk exists and where that uncertainty remains allows us to better understand the fiscal constraint for the plan. It also allows us to identify strategies and actions that that we as a region can use to avoid that risk between now and 2050. Notably, the risk assessment will not change the fiscal constraint, but we've used it to identify strategies that are included in the RTP and to better understand the constraint overall. Next slide. To complete the risk assessment, we went through a few different steps. First, we identified the potential risks, and then we worked with many of you in our financial plan resource group to prioritize the risks that had the greatest impact. We assessed each risk independently using sensitivity tests, and then we also did some multi-risk scenarios to see how different factors work together to impact revenues or costs in the plan. And then, like I said, we developed strategies that were incorporated into the plan. Next slide. Beyond brainstorming that initial universe of risks, our prioritization process tried to take into account two main things: the likelihood of different risks occurring and the scale of impact that they would have if they occurred. And we used that to identify the risks that had the highest likelihood and highest impact, or the highest impact even if there was a low likelihood of it occurring. Next slide. Through that process, we ended up with 16 risks that we evaluated and that we're working on documenting in our final briefing book. This includes eight risks on the revenue side, which the net impact of those would be lower revenues over the planning period, and then 8 risks on the expenditure side, which would result in higher costs over the planning period. These include a variety of things that we'll talk about this morning, but ranges from decreased federal and state funding to reduced transit fare revenues to even worse population forecasts that are being projected. And on the cost side, it includes everything from increased costs, something we've talked about a lot, to just the costs and growth that can happen when project delays occur. And with that, I will hand it off to my colleague, Danielle Hamer, to dig into the details.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Hammer. I'm a policy analyst here at CMAP. Can you hear me all right? Great. So now that you've heard an overview of the risk assessment and seen the full list of prioritized risks, I'll add some context by highlighting a few key trends that shape many of these risks. These trends guided the sensitivity tests that we built, which show how the financial plan's fiscal constraint could shift if the future differs from our baseline assumptions. After that, I'll walk through a few of our multi-risk scenarios where we combine sensitivity tests for risks that are likely to occur together and show how they can trigger or amplify one another. Next slide, please. So beginning with some key revenue risks, we looked at federal funding trends where the main theme here is uncertainty. The plan assumes that federal funds, which make up about 12% of total regional revenue, will grow at historical rates. Long-term growth has been modest, and while the IIJA temporarily boosted transportation funding in 2021, those higher levels aren't guaranteed moving forward. And as the chart here shows, transit rail, what transit rail and some other non-highway funding levels rose under the IIJA, but highway and street funding actually declined. With shifting federal priorities and increasing competition for grants, the region could receive smaller allocations than today's elevated baseline. And because even small declines in federal funding streams compound over time, this is an important area to test. So to reflect a potential post-IIJA drop-off, our sensitivity test here returns federal funding to those pre-IIJ levels in 2026, and then applies historical growth rates and also lowers the amount of competitive funds that the region would receive. We also modeled potential changes to our state revenue allocations. While the region's longstanding 38% share of statewide transportation funding has been relatively stable, it isn't guaranteed in statute and could be reduced in a tighter fiscal environment. So to test this, we modeled a reduction in the region's share of key statewide revenues over the plan period. Next slide. Another major source of uncertainty within the constraint is economic downturns, which is a risk that requires a bit of a more theoretical approach. While we can't predict exactly when a recession will occur or what shape it may take, we know that multiple downturns of varying severity are plausible over the plan horizon. Recent events can give us a sense of what these downturns may look like. During the pandemic, for example, transit system revenue dropped by more than 50%, with obvious cascading impacts on the fiscal health of the system. More broadly, recessions typically generate immediate declines in sales taxes, toll revenues, fuel purchases, and other sources. These drops often come with multi-year recovery periods. Economic contractions are likely to change consumer spending and travel behavior, which reduces transportation revenues both during the downturn and through the recovery phase. So to estimate both that near-term volatility and the long-term impacts of recessions, we tested two simulated downturns. First, a COVID-like recession in which key revenues, including sales taxes, motor fuel taxes, and transit fares, drop sharply for 1 year, partially recover the following year, and then fully recover later in the plan period. And then secondly, we modeled a longer, more moderate recession in which a smaller decline in those same revenues lasts about 4 years and is followed by a longer recovery. Next slide. So now turning to our cost-based risks. In recent years, we know the region has experienced higher temperatures and heavier rainfall. And as events like flooding, extreme heat, and more frequent freeze-thaw cycles become more common, they are likely to accelerate asset deterioration and increase emergency response and preservation needs. Agencies are incorporating resilience strategies to account for these events, but even with those efforts, the rising frequency and severity of these events are pushing up maintenance baselines. So essentially, we're seeing that climate impacts are driving an increasing level of required maintenance. To capture this in our risk assessment, our sensitivity test increases maintenance and improvement costs across the system for both roadway and transit assets. Next slide. And another strain on the roadway network comes from the relationship between vehicle weight and pavement damage. Research shows that this relationship isn't linear. Pavement wear increases with the fourth power of axle load. So a vehicle with twice the axle weight will cause roughly 16 times the damage on a roadway. This matters because EVs tend to be heavier than gas-powered vehicles. And as EV adoption grows, they may add some additional wear. But the real driver of pavement deterioration is heavy trucks. With the region already moving more than 700 million tons of freight each year and national freight tonnage expected to grow by about 50% over the plan period, pavement stress is likely to intensify. And to reflect this, our sensitivity test here increases roadway maintenance and improvement costs. Go to the next slide. So now I'll transition by walking through our multi-risk scenarios, which explore alternative futures where multiple cost and revenue risks occur at the same time, often compounding each other's impacts on the constraint. These scenarios move us beyond looking just at these individual sensitivity tests in isolation. Instead, we're modeling more realistic conditions where different risks overlap, trigger additional risks, and affect both revenues and costs. By combining risks in these ways, we can see how changes to our baseline assumptions could theoretically shift the overall fiscal constraint. You can go to the next slide. So here's scenario one. As we noted earlier, even with that IIJA of elevated baseline, we're seeing that federal transportation funding to the region is under pressure. Growth has been modest and competition for grants continues to rise. At the same time, many local governments have struggled to put together the required match for competitive grants, which has led to missed federal funding opportunities. When funding is tight, operation inefficiencies tend to increase. So in this scenario, we modeled declining federal allocations alongside the risks of securing fewer competitive grants and then higher operating costs. Together, these factors reduce the region's ability to leverage outside funds, pull resources away from capital reinvestment, and ultimately increase the likelihood of project delays. This scenario is showing us how dependent the region is both on stable external funding and efficient internal operations to meet its needs. Next slide, please. This next scenario focuses on some major drivers of expenditure growth in the financial plan. In recent years, material and labor costs have risen to a new higher baseline, driven by sharp increases in post-pandemic recession years and compounded by supply chain disruptions. At the same time, project delays, which have been tied to permitting processes and other factors, have further added to overall costs. So to assess these risks together, this scenario applies the highest of CMAP's 4 cost growth paths, which reflects the longest expected lag before inflation cools from recession-related spikes. It also assumes a 1-year delay for every regional capital project. And finally, it incorporates higher operating costs to represent the downstream effects of increased project costs and delays. On the ground, these dynamics translate into reduced purchasing power and may force projects to scale back. Higher operating and project costs reinforce cycles of deferred maintenance. And ultimately, this scenario is showing us how many of our expenditure side risks can together undermine our long-term project investment strategy. As a methodological note here, this scenario also highlights some of the limits of our approach to the risk assessment. For one example, in an ideal world, we'd model more severe or variable delays across our RCPs rather than consuming a consistent 1-year shift to better reflect the realities of different projects across the region. Next slide, please. So before we transition from our scenario work to some of the more forward-looking pieces of the risk assessment, I want to briefly highlight what these individual sensitivity tests help us to understand. Each test shows where impacts on the fiscal constraint may be higher or lower than the others. And because we as a team are controlling the magnitude of change for each of these factors, our understanding of the underlying risks that we just talked about really shapes these outcomes that we're seeing here. So, for example, 2 of the highest impact risks, rising material and labor costs on the expenditure side, and then broad economic downturns on the revenue side, each have very significant effects on our overall constraint because their sensitivity tests shift nearly every cost or revenue bucket across the plan. And then by contrast, some risks like reduced transit fare revenue are going to affect a narrower set of revenues, so their overall impact is going to look smaller here. One note, project delay risk also shows a relatively modest standalone impact here compared to other major cost-related risks. But as we've talked about, delays are understood to be a common consequence or a co-occurrence with many of the other risks. Next slide, please. So now that we've really dug in and walked through some of the major risks facing our constraint, the final part of our risk assessment focuses on what we can actually do to address them. So we're shifting from diagnosing issues to identifying where we're reducing risk. A lot of these mitigation strategies are meant to complement the scenarios that we just reviewed, offering a set of practical priorities that are going to strengthen the system and also keep the constraint realistic. Next slide. So as you can see, these strategies cover a wide range of approaches that vary in scale, timeline, and type of approach. Many build on work that the region is already doing, and today we'll take a closer look at just a few of them, specifically those that are rising to the top as priorities for improving the system. Next slide. One of the most effective ways to manage funding risk is by strengthening regional coordination. And in recent years, we've seen strong examples of this through our priority investment strategy. Projects developed and implemented collaboratively have secured dollars that would have been much harder to win independently. For one example, the I-290 partnership between IDOT and CTA is leveraging state dollars and competitive IIJA funds to build a transportation corridor that will deliver on goals to increase safety, reduce congestion, and expand accessibility. And the Harvey Transportation Center, a collaboration between PACE and Metra, is using federal grants and state funds to expand accessibility options across its two systems. In both of these cases, we're seeing where shared goals and coordination have allowed agencies to leverage external funds and reduce costs had they been compared to had they been working alone. While progress like this continues across the region, the RTP process should strengthen the understanding of planning processes among local, state, and federal leaders, and improving the accuracy and consistency of data reporting for formula-based federal programs will also help to ensure that the region receives its full share of funding and is well positioned for future competitive funding opportunities. Next slide. Another major theme that emerged from the risk scenarios is the need to deliver projects more efficiently. When cost growth is high, even short delays can translate into significant added expenses. The region is already making meaningful progress in this area. The Blue Ribbon Commission has published recommendations aimed at accelerating delivery, which include establishing priority permitting processes and expanding performance-based planning to help projects move more predictably and quickly. And the tollway is now authorized to use alternative delivery contracting structures, which will give it more flexibility to speed up construction and reduce administrative bottlenecks. Within our own financial plan constraint process, we also saw agencies think strategically about how to prioritize specific parts of their projects to include in the constraint. Agencies are evaluating which components of a project are most essential and rephasing where needed to keep more projects across the region moving forward. Next slide, please. The next strategy that I'll speak to builds directly on many of the trends shaping this risk assessment: cost escalation, funding uncertainty, delays, all of which affect our ability to maintain and preserve our transportation assets. While the region has already done substantial work to define what strong preservation and maintenance look like, we're not keeping pace with what the system needs. Some of CMAP's recent asset management work, including our asset management brief, highlights some specific growth areas. Unlike some peer regions, we don't yet link asset condition directly to capital programming, meaning there's more work to do to optimize our investment strategy for higher need assets. And the brief also identifies opportunities to bring more data-driven tools into these decisions. The Blue Ribbon Commission strategy framework also engages with these challenges, as I mentioned, outlining ways to reduce inefficiencies that are contributing to deferred maintenance. And finally, as Bill spoke to earlier, CMAP's TRIP report is laying out a long-term vision for prioritizing assets that are vulnerable to climate change, which includes strategies focusing on high-risk areas like frequently flooded roadways. These are all strategies that we as a region know are essential, but they also point to a few concrete steps that we still need to take to move more consistently toward proactive maintenance and preservation. Next slide. So finally, our strategies highlight additional funding sources that can strengthen long-term capacity and help our region meet more needs. Some are already identified as reasonably expected revenues in the plan, while others represent emerging opportunities. I'll briefly highlight a few of these. A freight delivery fee would generate new revenue from e-commerce growth and align funding with the costs of wear placed on freight corridors. And a regional motor vehicle surcharge offers a more stable vehicle-based revenue source that would be less volatile than some of our travel-dependent revenues. And on the more innovative side, market-based tools like carbon pricing could diversify funding while supporting our climate goals. Before I close, I want to reiterate that the risk assessment, rather than making direct changes to our fiscal constraint, is serving as a complementary tool. It's our first attempt within a financial plan cycle at systematically testing the assumptions that are baked into the financial plan. This process taught us a great deal and lays a foundation for us to improve upon as we develop future financial plans and more advanced risk assessments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick to walk through one of the key revenue sources we're recommending, the road usage charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Welcome, Nick.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Merton, and I'm a policy analyst here at CMAP, and I will be talking about advancing a road usage charge in Illinois. We can go to the next slide. So this presentation is based on the road usage charge white paper that CMAP released this past December. And this comes out of the materials that are developing the RTP, as well as the reasonably expected revenues in the financial plan. This also builds on previous CMAP work and is based on transportation funding recommendations that were included in On to 2050, as well as the Plan of Action for Regional Transit, or the PART report. So over the next series of slides, I'll summarize the memo in about 3 sections. The first one will introduce the challenges with the current motor fuel tax system. Then I'll turn to the road usage charge and how it's going to address some of those challenges. I'll also call out what some peers are testing from around the country and some design considerations. I'll close out by turning to our state and our region and outlining some things that we should be thinking about and some next steps. One last note here, I will refer to road usage charges by their acronym RUC throughout the presentation. Can go to the next slide. So with that overview, we'll dive into the motor fuel tax and some of the challenges that it presents long term. Next slide. So to understand the impetus for developing a RUC or a road usage charge, it's helpful to trace the history of the motor fuel tax, in particular how it was designed to be a roadway user fee. So going back in time all the way to the early 1900s, we saw automobile ownership and usage rising a lot. And so there was a demand for more roadway infrastructure. But governments needed to find a way to finance those projects. User fees were identified to fund those new roadway investments so that those people that were benefiting from the new system would be paying for their use and their impact on the system. At this point in time, states were the first to implement motor fuel taxes, but then the federal government came in and implemented their own in 1932. Importantly, these motor fuel taxes all assumed that fuel purchases reflected road use and that it reflected road use pretty equally across different road users. So put a little bit differently here, vehicles were much more similar. And so if 2 people put the same amount of fuel in 2 different cars, they would still generally get the same amount of mileage out of it. They would be able to travel the same distance. And the core problem today is that is no longer true. Next slide. So if we move from the early 1900s to now, over the course of about 100 years, we can see that the state motor fuel tax in Illinois is the most prominent roadway user fee that we have. For scale, in 2025, it generated over $2.8 billion in revenue. So you can see that this is a key funding component, and it supports transportation investments, state projects, but also local projects across the state. A lot of the funding that comes from the state motor fuel tax does make its way to northeastern Illinois, and the figure on the right shows that. So these are forecasted levels or forecasted figures from the financial plan for the year 2027, and we estimate that nearly $1.5 billion from the state motor fuel tax will be spent in our region across a few different project categories. So all of this is to underscore the importance of the motor fuel tax and how much we rely on its performance to support the infrastructure that we have today, but also future investment. Next slide. So now let's turn to those challenges. Decreased fuel consumption is expected to erode the motor fuel tax over time. This chart shows a forecasted downward trend for fuel purchased all the way through 2040. And this is a challenge because if drivers are purchasing less fuel but still traveling the same amount, we'll be collecting less motor fuel tax revenue, which means we can't support our existing infrastructure. So there are three main reasons for this. Fuel efficiency has improved significantly in recent times, so vehicles need less fuel to travel the same amount of distance. We also see the adoption of electric vehicles, and as adoption continues to grow, we have more and more vehicles on our roadway system that are paying $0 in motor fuel taxes. And finally, we're seeing some changing travel patterns with slower, more incremental growth in vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So historically, before 2000, we saw much greater VMT growth year over year, and this was driving more fuel purchases, which then drove greater motor fuel tax returns. That does not appear to be the case for most of the 21st century now. So we have slow VMT growth, more incremental, and it's not likely to offset any of the reductions that we're seeing caused by fuel efficiency. Next slide. So the last slide walked through the core revenue challenges, and now this slide is going to focus on the other side of the equation, which is costs and cost growth. So this chart is showing how federal and state motor fuel taxes have failed to keep pace with rising transportation costs. So the top green line is the percent change in the National Highway Construction Cost Index. The Illinois motor fuel tax, which is shown in dark blue, shows very little change throughout most of this time period until we see the passage of Rebuild Illinois, which doubled the motor fuel tax rate and then indexed it to inflation. Even after this reform, we can see that the Illinois motor fuel tax fails to keep pace with the high levels of cost growth that we saw across all of the economy, but in particular in the transportation sector. Next slide, please. To be clear, Rebuild Illinois did drastically improve the financial position for how we fund transportation infrastructure, but there are still some long-term challenges that persist. So although the motor fuel tax rate is now indexed to inflation to ensure that it tracks better with cost growth, it does nothing to address the fact that drivers are expected to purchase less fuel over time, and that will diminish revenue despite those higher motor fuel tax rates. Additionally, Rebuild put a $100 surcharge on electric vehicles to help offset that lost revenue from no fuel purchases. However, on average, we find that that surcharge is not enough to fully replace the lost motor fuel tax revenue. In addition, it's a flat fee, and so it isn't tied to the road use of those electric vehicles. Next slide. So now I'm going to transition to describing RUC, or road usage charge, which is the leading proposal to address these motor fuel challenges that are seen across the country. Next slide. So what is a RUC? It's a tax that is charged to motorists based on the number of miles they drive, and this is instead of gallons of fuel purchased like we have in the existing motor fuel tax. And so this is how it addresses the fundamental challenge with our current system. There are different mechanisms that have emerged to record mileage through a RUC pilot or a RUC program. So I'll run through those. You can use an odometer that are already in vehicles to record that mileage. Others have tested smartphone applications to record mileage. And then there are also devices that you can plug into your vehicle. Some of those have GPS capabilities, others do not, and they're only tracking the distance traveled. Some pilots and programs tend to have combinations of these. So you might be doing an odometer reading, but you're actually using a smartphone application to take a photo of your odometer, which then uploads that. Another key aspect of RUC programs is that drivers are taxed more fairly. So under the current motor fuel tax system, we see that drivers of highly fuel efficient vehicles are paying less into the motor fuel tax than people that are driving low fuel efficiency vehicles. And this has important implications because we know that low income drivers are the ones that tend to be driving the low fuel efficient vehicles. So people with the lowest incomes are facing a higher tax burden in the current system that we have. Similarly, rural drivers tend to have less fuel-efficient vehicles than their urban counterparts. So under the current system, our rural residents are paying more into it. So RUC helps correct this and make the system more fair because it's taxing people based off of their usage, based off of the miles that they drive, not the vehicle that they own. Go to the next slide here. So RUC has been researched or tested across the country. The East and West Coasts have led this effort. Some states have been looking into this going back 2 decades or even a little bit more now, but other states off the coast are very engaged as well. There's significant diversity in terms of these states, from their urban to rural populations, what their economies look like, and how much vehicle miles traveled they have within the state. And so this really indicates that these motor fuel tax challenges are pervasive. They impact all states, and all states are looking for solutions. There is a notable gap in the country along the Mississippi River as you move north into the Midwest, and you can see that Illinois is clearly behind the progress that is being made elsewhere. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a summary of some of the types of things that states are testing or studying across the country. I'll call out a few of these. States are looking at how to create compatible RUC systems across state lines. So if you're a driver in Oregon and you're driving across the border into Washington State, you have 2 different tax rates there. How do we make that compatible? States are also looking at how to effectively educate the public on why we need a RUC. So how do we communicate the complex motor fuel tax challenges and the need for a RUC program? Pilots are studying how to implement RUC for passenger vehicles, but they're also thinking about the commercial truck fleet and what makes the most sense there. As I mentioned earlier, pilots are studying the tax impacts across different geographies, so rural drivers, suburban, urban drivers, in addition to the income class of the driver. And pilots primarily have broadly been addressing how these different technologies work, how accurate they are for recording and reporting that mileage to generate tax bills. Next slide, please. Now I want to introduce 2 RUC components that are important to consider when designing a RUC pilot or program because they can connect to broader policy objectives and goals. So first at the top, we've got reporting road usage. So you can have a manual program, which tends to mean that you're reading the odometer to determine how many miles have been traveled. But then on the right-hand side, you've got automatic, which means that mileage is being uploaded automatically to determine the tax bill. Next, we've got setting tax rates at the bottom there. So you can have a flat RUC tax rate that just charges all users the same per mile, or you could have a dynamic tax rate system that takes into account more features of road use. So what type of road are you on? Is it a local road or are you on an interstate? And perhaps the time of day that you're traveling. It's important to note here that the ones on the right side, as you can probably tell, the automatic and dynamic versions tend to be more complex to implement. Next slide. So this slide plots those two considerations to illustrate the likelihood of design combinations achieving additional co-benefits beyond just replacing the existing motor fuel tax. So some examples of co-benefits are congestion management, prompting mode shift, or reducing emissions. So this chart is showing lower complexity combinations like a manual flat RUC not being as likely to achieve those co-benefits. In contrast, the higher complexity ones, variable automatic RUCs, are in a better position to achieve the co-benefits. Next slide. So I'll wrap up on this slide. In the white paper, CMAP recommends that the state conducts a RUC feasibility study. This can help shape the design of an initial pilot, which will be really informative for an eventual program. And then we can also begin to bring the relevant stakeholders together and begin public education on this issue. The next thing I want to hit on is other states are experimenting with these pilots so that they can ultimately learn the preferences of their residents and what systems work best with their transportation infrastructure. Illinois should start doing this as well. When we identify our local preferences, we can help shape the policy objectives that we want. Then we can test them in a pilot and implement them in a program. Lastly, there are opportunities for innovation that haven't been robustly tested elsewhere, or maybe they have and they need to be repeated in another part of the country. And there are also some things that are just unique to our region that we might want to test for ourselves. So some examples of that could be, how do we integrate a RUC program on existing tolled facilities that we have? Another opportunity for innovation is, how could we layer rather local tax rates with the state tax rate to have a sort of composite tax rate in a RUC program? And then finally, Illinois, just like other regions, needs to do cross-state compatibility. So what is Indiana thinking of doing in Wisconsin, and what happens when we have drivers moving between our multi-state region? So there needs to be work to coordinate and administer those. In closing, RUC is a leading proposal to align road use back into a user fee system, which will enable sustainable funding for the current transportation system that we have, but also future investments. We can start to determine the vision for RUC Illinois, and that begins with a RUC feasibility study. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No shortage of variables to consider or challenges to be encountered. So thank you very much for the presentation. And at this time, we'll entertain any questions. Audrey.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation on RUC. I know it's something we've talked about in this state for more than a decade. Several times RUC legislation has been introduced in Springfield and it's been killed immediately. Is it your belief that there's an ability for us to do a feasibility study without state enabling legislation? Or do you feel like that's necessary, that we have to get through that?
Yeah, I'm going to pass that to Elizabeth.
I don't know that we've thought about that exact path forward, Audrey. We could talk about it some more. I think a state enabling legislation that asks us to do something like that would certainly have some power to it, but I'm not saying that that's something that we want. But also we pull together groups of folks to think about things and study things all the time. So that's also a path forward.
Mary?
CMAP, Mary Wasita, CMAP is coordinating the Connect 290 Blue effort for the rebuild of I-290 Forest Park branch of the Blue Line. Have you all contemplated trying to pilot something along these lines, road usage charge, as part of those planning efforts?
That has not been a part of that project at this point in time. I think the point of the CMAP work is to say that we need to study and research this more to set the direction for where we want RUC programs to go, or RUC pilots even. So potentially after studying and stakeholder engagement and buy-in, that could be a good example of where we might want to try this. And there are lots of other examples across the region and the state, all these different types of use cases that we're going to want to test. So yeah, that's an option.
And building off of that question, Mary, I took a note during your presentation. $1.5 billion in motor fuel tax will come to Northeastern Illinois in 2027.
Yep, that's our estimate.
The price tag for 290 is far, far higher than all the motor fuel tax coming to Northeastern Illinois, which is why I started my reaction with saying there's no shortage of challenges here. So lots to consider, lots to consider. We do have someone online, Amy Rynell, our committee meeting member from Active Transportation Alliance. Hello, Hello, Amy.
Hi, thank you. One statement and one question. I was talking to some folks in Oregon about their program this week, and they are rolling out, I think it's next year, the option for residents to pay a lump sum versus per mile to get past some of the resistance around mileage tracking. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know that other states have done that. My question was about the earlier data. the line graph where you were showing the cost estimates, and I was wondering if in that construction cost data set, if in maintenance, is embedded in those costs, or do we have separate data to look at how maintenance costs are changing?
Amy, are you asking about the highway construction cost index data?
Yes.
That does include kind of the full universe of highway costs. We can send you more information, but it includes everything from maintenance to reconstruction costs. But it's really focused on the materials and the labors and the labor and
Okay.
the inputs into those.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Henry.
So this wasn't bad but of course, we want vehicles to use less energy, right? We want Class 8 trucks to be more efficient. We want EV vehicles to be in the city. If nothing else, they don't pollute in the city and they're about twice as efficient. So this wasn't bad, but and we also want to say that, this is quick AI math, but EVs are used about 7,000 miles a year. Fuel efficiency in Illinois is 27 miles per gallon. So at 48 cents per gallon of Illinois tax, that's $124 a year. EV pays extra $100 a year in registration fees. So they're mostly paying for the roads. We just want to, because the very next conversation here is the climate action plan. Funding the roadway system. That's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to maybe do other aspects with RUC. But as far as fuel efficiency being a problem, it's not a problem, right? We want to be certain that we have that nuance as we talk about RUC, no matter what agency, transit or highway. I know I represent a highway agency. That's all. It's a comment more than anything. Thank you.
Yeah, we have different goals, and fuel efficiency and from a climate perspective is important. From a financial perspective, the fuel efficiency will erode though. And the thing is, when we have different users of the road being treated differently than by our tax system. And over time, as we have more and more EVs on the road, it means that the drivers of gas-powered vehicles are just going to be paying increasingly higher rates and making up a greater portion of that revenue that's collected. So although there's another mechanism to collect some of that revenue back from electric vehicles, as our rate increases over time, that will probably make up a smaller share.
And to build on your answer, Nick, I also thank you, Henry, for those comments. I agree overall on what you said in terms of the electric vehicles being more environmentally friendly. I think there's a number of challenges introduced here. So I think one of the main things this presentation was getting at is that over time, the motor fuel tax as a revenue source, the purchasing power is eroding and our built infrastructure environment continues to age. You brought up the motor vehicle registration. There's only one person sitting at this table whose agency receives those revenues. No local agency in Northeastern Illinois receives the motor vehicle registration funds. So it's not apples for apples in terms of comparison. Certainly, as people paying into the system need to consider their overall cost, but the road usage charge does not go to local agencies in Northeastern Illinois, the 284 in the Northeastern Illinois region. So therein lies another challenge, and I think why we're trying to look at a one-for-one in terms of like a substitution for the motor fuel tax.
Yeah, one way to think about the current motor fuel tax system is that it was just based on different technology for vehicles. And now technology has changed and we have much more fuel efficient vehicles. We have a whole new class of vehicles and electric vehicles that don't even use fuel. And so we just need to modernize the way that we tax road use to accommodate that.
I appreciate all of those points. I think maybe our ask is just to keep an eye on the incentives, right? And make sure they're aligned and not at cross purposes, right? Because part of why people may choose an EV right now is to save money on fuel, right? And that includes the tax, right? So as you change those levers. You just have to try to make sure. And I think you have that in mind, but I think it's just that's the overall point. We understand the need to maintain purchasing power, but we don't want to just undercut the way those other incentives are pointed, right?
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Gwen Heather Mullins from the RTA, and maybe I'm thinking too far ahead on this, but is the intent to ever overlap charging the RUC with the MFT, or would you sunset the MFT at some point and replace it with the RUC? Maybe that's too far out.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think only time will tell how that transition occurs, if it does occur. But yeah, eventually you would want to sort of conclude the motor fuel tax and completely transition vehicles onto the RUC. There probably would be a transition overlap period where they're both going though.
Scott?
First off, this is a really good report. I already sent it to my higher ups at the county just to review and read. So thank you for putting this together. You've obviously researched this issue quite a bit. I know this is kind of a hypothetical. I'm asking you to sort of give your opinion, but if not for the doubling of the MFT in 2019, do you think we would be further along in a RUC, either a pilot or doing more research? Because I fear, this is just my opinion, I fear we've locked in our system we have today because of the doubling of MFT with the inflation adjustments every year. I think that's why Illinois is so far behind, is because we've kind of baked in the cake, so to speak.
I think there's a chance of that being true. I think other states, though, have been looking at RUC pilots and programs and studying them long before we did rebuild Illinois. So that's probably part of the equation. We helped steady the ship in the near term, but yeah, like I showed, the cost growth and the purchasing power of our motor fuel tax will be eroded over time. And so those long-term challenges will get closer and closer, and then we'll have to deal with them.
Okay, I'm gonna keep us on time here, and we're gonna move on to our next presentation. Thank you again. Agenda item 6.02 is on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan update, and Mitch Hurst and Noah Harris are here today to give us an update on that plan with a focus on key transportation strategies. This item was deferred to today's meeting after we ran low on time in February. So thank you to the Climate Action Plan team for being flexible, and welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be here. My name is Mitch Hurst, he, him pronouns. I am a modeling analyst here at CMAP, and I was the technical lead on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan here at CMAP. So good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to present on our plan. So this project was funded in part by the US EPA and has been a collaborative planning approach effort between CMAP, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, as well as our partners in Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, or NERC. Thanks, Scott. Next slide, please. So the planning effort was a 20-month process that kicked off all the way back in May of 2024. And the last time that we brought this project before this committee was in August of 2024. So that was roughly between the orange and lime green circles on this timeline. So a lot has happened since that point, which we highlighted within the pre-read memo. And now we're at the end of the timeline and have released the final plan as of March of this year. Slide, please. So given that it's been a while since we have presented on the CAP to this committee, I'd like to give an overview of the region's emissions, walk through the scenarios included in the plan that outline a path toward net zero in 2050. And then my colleague Noah will give an intro, or we'll get into some of the plan's core actions, and we'll end with a brief discussion on plan implementation. Next slide, please. So the Climate Action Plan maps out a path to cut greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution across the entire greater Chicago region. So this region produces about 152 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent annually. So CO2 equivalent includes all greenhouse gases, not just CO2. And three sectors drive most of this planning region's emissions. So industry, led by steelmaking and refining and manufacturing, is the largest sector, representing about 36% of all emissions in the region. Buildings are the next largest segment of emissions, largely from fossil fuel heating and homes and businesses. And then the transportation sector represents about 26% of emissions, primarily coming from gasoline and diesel usage from passenger and freight travel. So smaller but important contributions also come from waste and agriculture and our water systems, which are shown in that smaller bar in orange, representing about 3% of the region's emissions. And forests and natural carbon sequestration, so our trees, our wetlands, our prairies, capture about 2% of emissions through carbon sequestration. Next slide, please. So when we look at emissions from a geographic perspective, we see that local context matters quite a bit. So while Cook County produces the most total emissions, if you start to look at things at a per capita level, then Lake and Porter counties in Northwest Indiana jump out with large industrial footprints, and they have much higher emissions per capita, as do several other counties within the CMAP region. So this highlights really the need for strategies that are tailored not only to the planning region as a whole, but to each county's unique emissions profile. Next slide, please. So next, we will walk through some of the scenarios that are presented within the full plan. So the plan presents three complementary scenarios. The first is a current policy scenario. Then we have the full plan implementation scenario. And then finally, a state and local portion of the plan implementation scenario. So the current policy scenario really allows us to project future greenhouse gas emissions under existing state and federal policies. So it allows us to understand just how far existing policies will help advance the region towards meeting the plan's decarbonization goals, and more importantly, to identify the additional reductions that are needed to reach our plan's targets. The full plan implementation scenario and the state and local portion of the plan implementation scenario reflect estimated greenhouse gas reductions under different levels of policy ambition and coordination, and most importantly, area of implementation. So the full plan implementation scenario reflects the full set of strategies that are needed in order to get us to the plan's full target, while the state and local portion of the plan implementation scenario looks at things that are already on the books in various states, municipalities, counties across the country. So these are things that we in Illinois, we in various counties, municipalities have the ability to implement today, and other areas have already done so. Next slide, please. So the first step is thinking about the progress that we have already made. So quickly, looking back from the year 2005 through 2020, the greater Chicago region has reduced emissions by about 20%. A significant start, though plenty of room for continued reductions. Slide, please. And relative to 2005 levels, the plan sets a long-term reduction target of 85% by 2050, shown here by the red star. And notably, I will quickly note that this reduction target is a reduction in gross emissions, not net emissions. So that means we are simply looking at the emissions that we are producing. And while the plan lays out strategies for additional natural carbon sequestration, we are really focused on the goal of reducing the emissions that we are currently emitting, not only trying to capture them. So this goal is consistent with ONTRU 2050, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Climate Action Plan, as well as the City of Chicago's decarbonization targets. And the target aligns with national modeling, which assumes that roughly 75 to 85% of gross reductions by mid-century, with the remainder offset through carbon sequestration. So the current policy is the first slide that we'll walk through here. So through our modeling, we examined future emissions trajectories to understand how much more action would be required to meet our goal. So the current policy scenario, which is primarily comprised of CEJA, or the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, as well as the follow-along bill, SURJA, would reduce emissions by about 36% by 2050. So even with continued population and job growth, we are still projecting with current policy things that are on the books already, a reduction. Again, not enough to get us to where we need to go for our target, but it is a reduction. Next slide, please. And so here is the full plan implementation scenario, which includes 36 modeled strategies across 7 different sectors. And it shows us a path to an 86% reduction in emissions by 2050. So the scenario builds on precedent, expanding in policies and programs that already exist, some already in parts of our region and others across the country. And so that, I think, was a really important part of these various strategies, was to look at things that had already been completed to understand kind of where we can go. And it also draws on benchmarks from state and national models for some sectors where there are larger questions, such as aviation emissions. So achieving this scenario requires ambitious action across all levels of government, including renewed and expanded federal policies that support larger economic and technological shifts. So for example, EV sales requirements, such as Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Trucks, were previously adopted in states like California, but are now under legal challenge. So those are assumed to be restored in this scenario. These mandates are critical to rapidly transitioning our vehicle fleet to EVs. And another example is stronger federal action on industrial emissions. So industry represents the largest gap between what state and local actions can achieve and where federal action and leadership is essential, particularly in high emitting sectors like iron and steel. Next slide, please. So the state and local portion of the plan, of the full plan implementation scenario, was something that we felt was really important to call out. And again, we really wanted to isolate the actions that from the full plan scenario that we can implement as a region, as a state, as counties, as municipalities. And these actions alone could achieve a 58% reduction in emissions by 2050 without any new federal policies. So this is a powerful demonstration of what we can accomplish on our own in partnership with state governments. So buildings present the largest opportunity for state and local action, but transportation reductions are, while a little smaller than buildings, are still very significant. And on the next slide, we will get into some core actions. So as I mentioned earlier, there are numerous strategies included in the various scenarios and the plan itself. I encourage you to check out the full plan to find out more about those. But however, some key strategies that really define the region's path or move the needle toward the reduction target can be summed up into 6 core actions. And Noah will step through the 2 that are bolded on this list. But before he does do that, and on the next slide, we want everyone to start thinking about the different ways that CMAP approaches its work. So we're hoping that this will help guide the discussion about plan implementation that we have at the end. So here are our 4 approaches shown in no particular order, but starting on the left, we take on local and regional planning efforts like the development of the Climate Action Plan, as well as others like the Regional Transportation Plan. We also help shape and advance policy alongside our legislative affairs team to address transportation, land use, regional economy, and environmental challenges across the region. A lot of the policy development that we do is grounded in robust data collection, research, and analysis. So for example, think of all the work that we do or that went into the PART, or the Plan of Action for Regional Transit, and the resulting legislative recommendations and outcomes. And lastly, CMAP fully embraces strategic collaboration and coordination. So we've often seen as often been seen as a convener, and CMAP understands the strength of working with our partners and stakeholders to tackle regional challenges and opportunities. And with that said, I'll hand it over to Noah to dive into some strategy.
Thanks, Mitch. Good morning, everyone. Hello, this is Noah Harris. I'm a policy analyst with CMAP. So to provide some context before diving into some of the plan's core actions, we want to share the reduction targets for the transportation sector. So achieving the plan's overall economy-wide emissions reduction target requires action across all sectors, and sector-specific targets like these reflect each sector's unique challenges and opportunities to decarbonize. So under that full plan implementation scenario, the transportation sector must achieve more than a 90% reduction by 2050 to align with the overall plan goals. And when considering state and local action alone, those outcomes shift. The transportation sector has the potential to achieve nearly 65% of its reductions by 2050. So while the state and local actions alone cannot achieve the full level of decarbonization required, strong leadership at these levels can drive substantial change. The first core action I want to present today is to reimagine mobility. Throughout our transportation working group meetings, we heard strong support for reducing vehicle miles traveled and shifting travel to more efficient modes. These strategies reduce emissions, provide real co-benefits, and critically reduce the anticipated strain on the grid in response to the EV transition. Reimagining mobility across the region requires investing in transit to increase ridership and building out networks of active transportation infrastructure to increase biking, walking, and rolling. And advancing new pricing mechanisms to reduce peak period car trips can also contribute meaningfully to VMT reduction. We also heard through our community engagement about the significant barriers to EV ownership, especially for residents with lower incomes. So this challenge highlights the importance of investing in infrastructure that facilitates safe and easy access to transit, as well as land use changes to support transit-oriented development, ultimately shortening car trips and reducing dependence on cars in the region. One of the most effective emissions reduction strategies in the plan for the transportation sector is to reduce VMT growth. Our modeling efforts found that to reach the plan's transportation emissions reduction target, the region must reduce per capita VMT by 12% by 2050, a change that's projected to cut transportation emissions by 11% relative to that current policy scenario. And to achieve these reductions, the VMT assumptions are applied differently within the larger planning area. In the 7 counties within the CMAP region, VMT growth is limited to a 1% increase by 2035 and a 2% increase by 2050 below CMAP's business as usual forecasts, which expect higher growth due to population and jobs increases. And then across all those other counties in the 13 county planning area, VMT growth continues as in the current policy scenario, reaching a 20% increase by 2050, meaning no avoided VMT growth in that portion of the planning area. These VMT targets here they're grounded in staff level analyses that we conducted to support the modeling and review of VMT trends, research of peer regions, and more to ensure that we're making realistic assumptions and to guide the region towards the most impactful implementation of strategies. The next core action I'd like to discuss today is to electrify vehicles. This action here focuses on transitioning passenger and freight vehicles to electric and zero emissions technologies, alongside robust charging and grid infrastructure investments, which are essential components to accelerating the EV transition. In the next few slides, I'll highlight strategies to accelerate passenger EV adoption in particular, given that on-road passenger travel is one of the largest emitters in our region. So to meet the region's transportation emissions reduction target, our analysis, which we wrapped up late last summer, shows that we need 100% of new light-duty vehicle sales to be electric by 2035, in addition to the work needed to reduce vehicle miles traveled. In light of our need to transform the vehicle fleet, we'd like to take a moment here to review recent policy changes to help provide some context. So first, in yellow on the screen here, you can see an estimate of what EV sales could have been under the previous federal CAFE and emission standards adopted in 2024, along with the impact of those Inflation Reduction Act EV incentives. Impacting fleet composition and emissions across the region, these policies would have resulted in a fleet where 60% of new vehicle sales would be EVs by 2035. So that represents great progress, but falling short of what's needed. And as many of you are aware, those policies were rolled back. Emission standards have been challenged in court, and those IRA-based EV incentives concluded early. And with the absence of EV incentives and 2025 level emission standards, modeling demonstrates that 24% of new sales would be EVs by 2035. And this is a rate that does not include the more recent actions at the federal level to limit the setting of emission standards due to the rescission of the endangerment finding, which introduces further uncertainty around the EV transition. So to achieve the 100% EV sales needed by 2035, shown in green here, the plan outlines the need for EV sales requirements that are similar to California's Advanced Clean Cars 2 program, which Mitch referred to earlier. Implementation of a slightly more ambitious version of California's Advanced Clean Cars 2 program would require new sales to reach 100% EVs by 2035, with that EV sales rate then extended through to 2050. And then lastly, we estimated how much an additional state-based EV incentive could increase EV adoption, and that's shown in pink. Additional state EV incentives assumed to offer residents an average of $4,300 to purchase a new EV are imagined as a stopgap measure, backfilling those lost incentives at the federal level. And this comparison shows us that EV incentives alone they're certainly helpful at driving some amount of EV adoption, but clearly not enough alone. EV sales requirements, along with the incentives, provide the most impactful fleet shifts together. Because of that, the plan includes two core passenger vehicle electrification transition strategies: one, the sales requirements, and two, sales incentives. Our analysis assumes that across all 3 states in the planning area, 100% of new light-duty vehicles sold by 2035 and beyond will be EVs. And cumulatively, this would mean that the region would need to exceed 10 million light-duty EVs on the roads by 2050. In total, EV sales requirements could help the region achieve a 36% reduction in transportation emissions by 2050. And those state EV incentives could result in an additional 5% reduction by 2050 relative to the current policy scenario. And despite the recent changes at the federal level, Illinois is making great strides on the EV transition front, with a goal through CEJA to achieve 1 million EVs on the roads by 2030. Advancements in public agency fleet transitions and rebates for vehicle adoption and charging infrastructure at the state level. Building on these efforts will be critical to accelerate the passenger EV adoption and alignment with our transportation sector reduction goals. And I'll pass the mic back to Mitch here to talk a little bit about implementation and next steps. But we encourage you, if you jump to the next slide. Yeah, we encourage you to download the plan through the QR code and learn more about the other ways the region can reduce emissions in the transportation sector and the other sectors towards climate action.
So we can go, perfect. So next we'd like to briefly talk about some of our next steps towards implementation before getting into some room for discussion. So there are several projects then that are currently underway or upcoming that will continue to advance our work. So first off, CMAP has started the process to create a 2025 regional greenhouse gas inventory, which will provide a more up-to-date quantitative basis for tracking progress and updating targets. So this will provide emission summaries for the 7 counties, for the region as a whole, for municipalities, as well as for Chicago community areas. So it gives you various levels of information on emissions. And if anybody has any questions about that, I'm the project leader and would love to chat about it. Relatedly, we will also be developing a CCAP status report in May of 2027, where we will be assessing and reporting out on the implementation progress of the various CAP strategies. And then CMAP is also closing in on the second year of the Energy to Community project, or E2C, and anticipate wrapping it up by the end of next year. And I'll get into a little bit more about that project on the following slide. So as a reminder, CMAP is partnering with ComEd and the Respiratory Health Association with technical support from Argonne and Oak Ridge National Laboratories to conduct an exploratory modeling that examines different pathways to decarbonize the transportation sector across the 7 CMAP county region by 2050, and exactly how those different pathways could affect ComEd's electric grid. So the core objective is to better understand the scale of investment needed to meet the transportation greenhouse gas reduction target that we have established in the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan for Greater Chicago, as well as the benefits and trade-offs of various strategies. So those include everything from pricing, infrastructure investments, both in terms of roadways, public transportation, as well as active transportation. Similar to what Nick was talking about, we've looked at some road usage charge scenarios, parking scenarios, land use scenarios, freight scenarios. So this project really lets us get into the nitty-gritty of some specific implementation level findings to get at some of those transportation strategies that Noah described. And so as the modeling results become available, the team looks forward to re-engaging with the Transportation Committee and sharing the findings for discussion. Next slide, please. And to circle back to this slide, so now that the CAP has been released, we are transitioning to early implementation and broader engagement around the plan. So we're developing a set of materials to make the plan actionable and digestible for different audiences. So this includes things like 2-pagers, county profiles, where we will identify strategies that are kind of linked directly to counties and are more or less effective in certain counties within the region, as well as news articles highlighting key insights and opportunities identified within the plan. And we're also beginning conversations to understand where CMAP can be most useful when it comes to implementation. And so this brings us back to thinking about approaches and types of work that CMAP engages in. And the discussion questions that I have for you today will hopefully let us get into that a little bit. So 2 discussion questions. Otherwise, we'll also take any other questions or comments that are out there. But 2 questions that we have for y'all. How can CMAP best support the implementation of the Climate Action Plan? And where might CMAP provide the greatest value?
Thank you very much. At this time, are there any questions or comments from the committee? I see you raising your hand, Mary.
Mary Wasita, thanks for the great overview. Regarding the VMT reduction goals, can you tell me more about how those were calculated? And extension to your question, how can CMAP provide value? I'd be curious to see thinking around how those goals might differ throughout the region based on land use, access to alternative modes of transportation, et cetera.
Yeah, great question. So our region is one thing that we always came back to is I think if the whole region was a state, we'd be like the 10th or 11th largest state in terms of population. There's a lot of different things that occur within our region. In terms of how we developed those VMT assumptions, we took it was kind of a combination of approaches. So we had done some internal modeling using some of our own tools like the travel demand model, where we had tested various policy scenarios. You know, we're always kind of testing different things for various projects. So we kind of reviewed some of that work that had already been done for things like PART, and looked at, various pricing scenarios that were running that to just kind of get an understanding of where those would get us in isolation. And then we also had some initial results from that E2C project, from the E2C project that I mentioned with Argonne, that really helped us inform kind of how to set those VMT reduction targets specifically by a county level. So they do, while they kind of aggregate out to, I think, a 1% increase in VMT by 2035 and a 2% increase by 2050 or a 12% reduction per capita, that does vary a little bit by county. I will say we are looking forward to kind of the finalization of that E2C project to really help guide some of those additional understandings of exactly how much that varies by county. But certainly things like land use or access to transportation, either active or public transit, certainly play a large role into how much VMT can be shifted. Similarly, we are thinking about different transportation project implementations that could help increase the exposure to transportation or to public transit that might be able to increase those values in other regions. So it was kind of a combination of approaches of looking at various modeling that we had done internally, some modeling that we did with E2C, and then also a review of some other MPO VMT reduction targets to get us to the target that we have in the plan.
Thanks, Mitch. I have a question. With regards to the climate action plan, I see in the memo, it says it was funded by US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So there was certain objectives and things to look at and evaluate due to the funding and the focus of this climate action plan. In terms of this committee, other items that have come before us have been, we look at conformity through the TIP, and then we also look at we see that through the CMAC, the congestion mitigation air quality. And I think many of us at the table were also interviewed by CMAP for preparation. Bill, you mentioned earlier that there's the TRIP plan, the Transportation Resilience and Improvement Plan. So my question pertains to how those all intersect and complement each other in terms of where the action plan fits into some of those other elements that are often contemplated and discussed at this committee. And Bill, you're leaning in.
Yeah, I can take that.
Thank you.
Mitch, if you want to join in. I mean, so I think one of the ultimate goals that we want to achieve with this smattering of efforts in the climate resilience space is to have better informed programming decisions. So how can we bake in resilience considerations, climate GHG emissions considerations in vetting and approving projects that come before us, much like we do with safety. The RCP analysis had initially took those into consideration, but as we refine our understanding of the levers that we control and the reductions that we can achieve, we're going to be baking those considerations into programming. So one of the climate action plan's implementation steps is if they haven't started already, they're going to be starting it very soon, is looking at our peer MPOs to figure out how are they considering GHG reduction or emissions targets in programming decisions, and begin to figure out how we can bring that into the considerations that are brought to a committee like this.
Thank you. Now, for the CMAQ funding, does that overlap in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? I remember us talking about like particulates, but is greenhouse gas emissions considered in the CMAQ funding? Doug Ferguson, welcome.
And program lead for the CMAQ federal programming. Yes, so we have looked at greenhouse gas emissions with our CMAQ, but we don't utilize them because federally they're required. We're supposed to address ground level ozone, which is VOCs and NOx. So that's what we use as our primary. Also, the greenhouse gas emissions tend to travel on the same like curve as VOCs. So projects that reduce VOCs also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're
Very good. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Anyone else have any questions or comments on the climate action plan?
I just have one comment. So if you haven't read this report, I urge you to do so. It's well-researched and it presents literally a blizzard of thoughtful, modeled strategies. And it's easy to become overwhelmed in taking all that into account. So I just would hearken back to the slide or the slides that we saw where 58% of the reduction capacity is within state and local control. And then even drilling down further in the transportation sector, which is near and dear to this committee's heart, I think we can achieve 60+% reduction. So we control that. The people sitting around this table and the folks sitting in Springfield can make actual progress in the transportation sector. So don't get overwhelmed. Sort of like a large elephant, you need to eat it one bite at a time. And there are actionable strategies that each of us can own if we have the will and the energy. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at that report. Thank you.
Yeah, and quickly adding to that, Bill, the one thing that I found very inspiring throughout this project was that all of the state and local portion of this plan are things that have already been implemented in various places. So these are things that we can do, and within the plan, it shows you where these things have been implemented, how they've been implemented. So of course, there's a lot of work around coalition building and implementation and all of that wonderful detailed work. But I did find that piece to be a very optimistic part of the plan. So if anybody's looking for a little optimism, worked for me.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, last question, Amy online.
Thank you. I have a few questions. One is, this week, the state released its comprehensive climate action plan for comment. And I'm just wondering if you all have had a chance to look at that and see where there's synergy, given the importance of state policy and local policy making and the ways that state policy can enable local policy. I'm just wondering if you all have taken a look and are able to give them feedback.
Yes, and we have been working in partnership with the state. So that plan is actually developed via the same program as our climate action plan. So we have certainly been collaborating with the state already on different strategies. Obviously, certain sectors are much larger for our region, especially with Northwestern Indiana industry, for example, whereas at a state level, they have more agriculture emissions. So there are differences just in terms of the strategies, and we're still reviewing the full plan. But I think there's a lot of similar approaches, especially amongst buildings and transportation.
Thanks for that. I also wanted to flag that I think the timing did not work out for the creation of these plans, but the Georgetown Climate Center has kind of strengthened and rolled out in a bigger way their T-CART tool, TEA CART. And I don't know if you all have taken a look at that, but that helps transportation decision makers take into account climate outcomes when considering how to spend transportation dollars. So I think it may be a tool we could be using as we're reviewing projects and creating projects across all the entities in this room to assess the climate impacts. So I just wanted to share that.
Head nodding.
Okay.
Nodding his head. So
okay, cool. It's a really cool tool. We worked with them on some earlier stuff to model VMT reduction, and we're able to translate into some goals like, if we were to shift one car trip out of every 5 into another mode, walking, biking, or transit, what the impact on climate would be. And it's really profound. And I think we could, I appreciated, Noah, you're listening to all of us on the mobility choices and incorporating that here. And I think there are ways that we can actually make it a lot more actionable and easy for people to wrap their heads around what they could do every day, in addition to policy. So I guess just a thank you.
okay. That concludes the section of the agenda on the climate action plan update. Thank you, Mitch and Noah, for your presentation. Moving on to other business. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward? Yes, Chuck.
I just wanted to say that I'm stepping down from the committee, and Patricia Noguera, who's my wonderful planner, and she's just waving her hand there, and she'll be replacing me.
Okay, and for those of you online, Chuck represents Illinois Department of Transportation, Office of Intermodal and Project Implementation.
Great.
So, okay, thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation over the years.
Appreciate it.
Any other members? Megan?
Big day for the Illinois Department of Transportation and changes. I just wanted to let you all know that I am moving on to a different position within the Illinois Department of Transportation on May 1st. I'm going back to the Bureau of Research, which is where I was for about 14 years before I started this job. And I'm going to go be the Research Program Unit Chief. Brandon Gaber is going to be filling in for me. Well, my position here in planning is vacant. And I just wanted to say I have really enjoyed working with all of you. It is so exciting to work with people who are passionate, who make big plans, who have a lot of hope for the future, and are always trying to make things better. So it was just a really wonderful experience. I appreciate all of you, and I hope our paths will cross again.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks again for your participation as well. All the best to you and Chuck as you move on. Mary?
Mary Wasita, two quick updates. Audrey asked earlier about the 92 Street Bridge design, and yes, the bike lane will remain, and there will need to be a detour when the bridge work is happening. Looking down there, but she may have stepped out, so I'll follow up with her. I always try to prepare for all her design questions, but sometimes I miss, so I appreciate our PMs providing me live updates. The second update I wanted to make sure folks were aware of related to climate and reduction in emissions. The city for a long time has been working on our EV and e-mobility strategies. We've reached a major milestone in trying to provide EV access where the private market isn't providing it, especially to folks in multifamily housing. And so we released an RFP last week to identify a vendor that will operate and maintain an EV curbside charging pilot. So I am happy to provide more information to anyone on the committee, to folks listening about that pilot, but just want to spread the word. We're trying to make sure we have as many qualified vendors respond to that RFP. Thank you.
Okay. Any other business that committee members would like to bring forward? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the public comment period. So public comments will be taken in the following order. First, we're going to have comments from in-person attendees that have been submitted ahead of time. Comments from in-person attendees not previously submitted. Then third would be from virtual attendees via Zoom that have been submitted ahead of time. Fourth would be comments from virtual attendees via Zoom not previously submitted. And then last would be comments written or emailed in the order they were received. So as a reminder, comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. The total cumulative time for the comment period, as noted on the agenda that was posted online, is 15 minutes. However, at the end of the 15-minute comment period, a motion and second can be made for the committee to vote to extend the comment period by 15-minute intervals, and that is what we did back in February. So first, we will move to members from the audience. We do have members of the public who have requested to speak during the public comment. So I'm going to read the first few names so you know the order. First would be Claire Falk and Paul Jacobs, and then Tasnim Tanbir. So if Claire Falk is present. Yes, if you could please come to the podium. And then Paul and Tasnim next. Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. That sounds better. My name is Claire Fauke, Fauke. I live in Chicago and Logan Square with my 3 kids. One of the best things about living in Chicago is that my kids have enjoyed so much independence due to their ability to walk and bike and take transit just about anywhere. And of course, one of our favorite places to go separate and as a family is the lakefront. And you would think that of all the places to go to ride bikes or walk, the path would be the safest. No cars, no trucks, no people hopping in and out of Ubers and swinging their doors in front of us, no drunk drivers, no road rage. So the lakefront path is wonderful until you realize that it's only steps away from an 8-lane expressway. And this design makes our beautiful lakefront a dangerous place for families like mine. And let me give you a recent example. Just last weekend, we celebrated my youngest child's birthday, and more than anything, he wanted a new bike because he's been riding a hand-me-down from his 2 older brothers for many years. And to celebrate the new bike, he wanted to go on a long ride on the lakefront path. And we had a wonderful ride, and there's nothing like the long stretch of car-free path and the gorgeous view of the lake and the skyline. But the very next day, several friends sent me a video clip of a car that had flown off of DLSD at high speed, plowing right over the path where me and my child had been riding only the day before. When I saw this, my heart dropped at the thought of my baby or anyone else's loved ones losing their life simply because of poor design and a refusal by our city and state leaders to put people ahead of cars. And my heart also sinks for the thousands of families who think twice about spending their day at the beach or on the path because it feels too dangerous, too loud, too polluted, or simply too hard to access because there is an 8-lane highway running right through it. I think most of us here agree that our lakefront is Chicago's most valuable natural asset, and generations of Chicagoans before us have fought to protect it. And we now have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally make it safe, free, and open for all. I took the day off work today because this is so important to me to come here in person and talk to you face-to-face. So I ask you, please, as we redesign DLSD, to prioritize people like my family, my kids, our elders, residents, and visitors alike, and finally put people in front of cars. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Claire. Paul Jacobs is next. Okay. Tasnim Tanvir, sorry. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, Tasneem. Yeah. Yes, so I wanted to just talk briefly and say that, DLSD was made into what it is today, which is a highway on our lakefront under certain circumstances. Circumstances such as cheap gas, easy ways of obtaining gas, and, up until recently, we had tax subsidies for EVs. Not because of the efforts of anybody in Chicago or Chicagoland, we are now in a situation where those things are not true. And truthfully, no one in this room has control over those things being true or not. We don't have control over what the president decides to invade or what tariff policy he puts in next, or the instability, the increasing instability of the world. And so this is very unstable. The assumptions that were based under this highway, they are falling away fast. And so if we recommit to this status quo, it is putting billions of dollars, and it's missing an opportunity that we won't have again for another 50 years to change it for the better and rest on something that is firmer and more rock solid. Honestly, like, we talk about our emissions and we talk about the money that we'll use to reduce the emissions for our region, but honestly, transit is one of the best uses of that money and the most efficient uses of that money. And so when we redesign this, I want to see my money being used wisely as a taxpayer, as a resident. And I want to see that prioritized over an incredibly expensive and incredibly fragile method of travel. I also just wanted to comment personally that the status quo has a huge cost. I don't know if it can be quantified in dollars, but it has a huge cost for the people who live here, for the families who live here. It's 30 years ago now, but I remember walking with my grandfather on the lakefront, and I was only 5 years old, and I still remember that. And even when we moved away and we left Chicago for some time, I still always remembered that. And when I made choices about where to go to school from university, it stuck in my memory. There are many beautiful places in this world, but there are not very many places like our lakefront. There are not very many places like our lakefront and skyline combined. And so it's a huge attraction for people, even decades after the fact. And now I'm raising my son in Chicago, and I'm asking myself, is he going to be able to make those memories that I made with my grandfather, with my parents, or my in laws? And truthfully, I don't know, because when I was 5, my grandfather was able to walk above DLSD to get to the lakefront, and he was able to make that trek. But shortly after that time, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Oh,
Thank you.
Nick Schrag and Alex Thrush with Chris up after that.
Hello, my name is Nick Schrag, a Chicago resident for almost 20 years, and I'm here to comment on the North DLSD project. Greater Chicago stands at a pivotal moment. Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It is here shaping our weather, our economy, and our communities. The challenge is immense, and the need for action is urgent. By taking bold, coordinated steps today, Greater Chicago can not only meet its climate responsibilities, but lead the nation in building a clean, inclusive, and competitive economy. That's an excerpt from the introduction to the Climate Action Plan for Greater Chicago that was presented earlier in this meeting. That plan has new data and new guidance that need to be incorporated into the designs for our lakefront. Lakeshore Drive serves primarily passenger vehicles, and passenger vehicles account for 18% of regional greenhouse gas emissions. In order to reduce emissions, the Climate Action Plan calls for a greater emphasis on building everyday mobility networks that allow residents to safely and conveniently travel without a car. It calls for infrastructure investments such as bus-only lanes and transit signal priority in order to make bus service faster and more reliable. It challenges us to reimagine mobility. The Lakeshore Drive design recommended in August of 2024 has some amazing features. It builds out much of the needed shoreline protection, increases access to the lakefront trail, and expands parkland by over 100 acres. However, it falls short of redefining the drive. It is still the same cars first 8-lane highway that exists today. Highways don't address local transportation needs. They are designed for long distance high-speed travel. They drive up congestion on local streets. They destroy wealth by taking up space and lowering the value of nearby land. Rebuilding a highway might be an easy way to see an influx of funding from federal and state sources, but the long-term financial liability falls on the city. We can't afford that here. Fortunately, there's still time to change. We need to take bold action and redecide the drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Thrush and then Chris Katianis. Ellen Steinke after that.
Hey, everybody. My name is Alex Thrush. I live in Chicago, South Loop specifically. Sorry if you're sick of hearing about LSD and talk about it some more. I'm asking CMAP not to move forward with the LSD in its current form. Our lakeshore should be an enjoyable public resource that is easy to access and not blocked off by 8 lanes of private car traffic. As it stands now, anyone who wants to take advantage of this great resource is subject to the constant vehicle exhaust, noise pollution, and diminished amount of park space caused by 8 lanes of vehicle traffic. Even as electric vehicles proliferate, most of these problems will remain. Locking in this arrangement for decades to come will be an immense mistake. That's all.
Thank you. Chris? And then we have Ellen and then Christopher Taratska after that.
Hi, my name is Chris. I live in Chicago. I'm asking CMAP not to move forward with DSLD in its current form. We heard about the ballooning costs of maintaining our giant road network, and we heard about the climate action plan. If CMAP moves forward with the DSLD plan as it stands, which I'm wondering, where does it stand? Because IDOT hasn't made any updates on their website for this. The last update is August 2024. But we saw a timeline from another group that had a bunch of little progress dots earlier today since August 2024. What's going on with IDOT with this plan? Have they changed it? Is something going on behind closed doors? We don't know, because they haven't put out any public information. So moving forward with something that is outdated, is based on bad assumptions, and doesn't have any public comment for years is not really friendly to the people of Chicago. I don't know how many people sitting at this board live in Chicago, but this is not just, that's not really a good public comment plan. I don't know if anyone has a lighter, but if we move forward with this, you can just light this up. Because what's the point of having a climate plan if we're just trying to drive more and more and more traffic, not just through the city, but also along the lakefront? I'm planning to raise my kids, my fiance and I, we're planning to raise our kids in Uptown. Building something like this is going to drive people not just from Uptown, but from the city, at the benefit of people that live up in the Home Alone neighborhood. And that's not really for the people of Chicago. So we should not move forward with this. And we also need to hear, I don't know if anyone from IDOT is here, but is there any information on this? I would love to hear what's going on with it. But CMAP should not move forward with this plan until we actually have real information. Thanks.
Thank you. Ellen is next.
Hi, my name is Ellen Steinke, and I live in the Lakeview neighborhood, and I want to talk about a broader pattern I'm seeing, not just on DeSable Lakeshore Drive, but across Illinois. So in the suburbs where I ride horses, there's a road called Dunham Road. Thank you. That divides the Wayne equestrian community from Pratt's Wayne Woods. And it used to be something that you could easily cross and ride in nature for miles. But now it's effectively a high-speed arterial with a constant stream of cars and heavy trucks traveling around 60 miles an hour, which is 15 miles an hour over the posted 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. You can hear it deep in the woods, and it's becoming too dangerous to cross. I don't know, I'm getting emotional. What a day. It's an IDOT road, and after I submitted a traffic safety review request, I was told there's nothing to be done because it's a strategic arterial. But that's not unique. Across the nation, we have highways and high-speed arterials running through or alongside most of our valuable natural spaces. The result is noise, pollution, and a loss of access, especially opposite the places that are meant to be. They're supposed to be natural places. They're not supposed to be highway ditches. So DeSable Lakeshore Drive is actually one of the most visible examples of that pattern here in the city, and it runs through Chicago's most important public spaces, but it functions like a highway. It creates a barrier between neighborhoods and the lake, and it prioritizes speed and throughput over safety, access, and quality of life for the people who use that space every day. Other cities like Seattle and Boston and even Milwaukee, Paris, they're rolling back their seaside and lakeside, riverside highways, and they're seeing great success with that. And people love that, and it's good for the economy. But here in Chicago, instead of following like what's a forward and progressive and economically advantageous thing to do, we're actually doing the opposite. And we're investing billions and billions of dollars, which essentially are dollars borrowed from our grandkids, to put in a highway that will be bad for our grandkids and reinforce car dependency, which is kind of a 60s, 80s sort of mindset for a generation that doesn't want car dependency. We want more freedom, more choices, more climate-friendly options. Like we're all here talking about, well, how can we get enough money to spend on cars? But cars are the most expensive, least efficient, and most dangerous form of transportation. Why are we doubling down on something that is not a good investment? Like Tasneem said, it's not a good investment of my tax dollars, and it's dangerous. The city of Chicago, the Chicagoans altogether, in 2025, they spent $8 billion on car crashes from the expenses of hospital bills, productivity loss, property damage. This is costing us so much money, so much life, so much quality of life. Why are we doubling?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you.
sorry.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, please don't put highways next to nature. That's stupid. Thank you.
Christopher Taraska is next. And before we do that, I would like to entertain to see if there's a motion to be made to extend the comment period by another 15 minutes because we are very close to being up on that time. Megan, thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So we have Christopher Taraska. Supposed to be in person, Christopher? Okay. We have 11 more index cards. We have 14 people that submitted a request via Zoom in advance, and many more who have raised their hands. So the next up would be Jabran Ghani.
Leave that be. Hello, I'm Jabran Ghani. I'm a proud Chicagoan now. I have the pleasure of living in the Loop. And if you stand in the right part of my apartment, angle your head very optimistically, you can see the lake. And you can also, thank you. And you can also see Lakeshore Drive. I'm also here to speak about Lakeshore Drive. There have been some, I think, very important points made about safety and about the environment. And I wanted to throw in an important consideration for the future of Lakeshore Drive, which is the destruction of joy that Lakeshore Drive causes. The way Chicagoans get through the cold winter is waiting to go to the lakeshore on a sunny day. And when I look at the lakeshore and see Lakeshore Drive in the middle, I know that it will be a trek. It'll take much longer than it needs to. And when I reach the lakeshore, it'll be far louder than it needs to be. Consistently, the Lakeshore Drive causes the parks around it to reach noise levels in excess of 66 decibels. And on the occasional day on Bike the Drive, the noise level drops below 60 decibels. This noise pollution causes a hostile and uncomfortable environment that makes it difficult to enjoy a beautiful sunny day in the parks that the public deserves. And on the beaches that the public is so lucky to have access to. This is part of Chicago's offerings to people who want to move here. It's part of what it offers to its citizens, and it seems so ridiculous to have an 8-lane expressway bifurcating parks and the beach. I don't quite understand why we can't take some of that space, a lane here on both sides to install light rail or a bus lane, a lane to install sidewalks and bike lanes, or simply just taking lanes and adding more green space that Chicagoans would grow to appreciate. As it has been stated, cars are an outdated form of transportation, and Chicagoans deserve to have access to different and diverse options for transportation in every part of the city. We cannot continue privileging cars over cyclists, privileging cars over pedestrians, and privileging cars over transit riders. There are many Chicagoans, 34%, who don't own a car. The majority of people in Chicagoland who do own at least one car would really like to get rid of at least one of their cars. And Lakeshore Drive is an incredible opportunity to turn horrifying commutes, sitting in traffic, in pollution, and in noise from honking and tires, to the
Thank
option.
you for your comment. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you so much.
Next up is Madeline Caldwell, and after that, Alex Thrush.
Hi, my name is Maddie, and I'm a recent transplant to Chicago from Dallas, Texas. And while there are a lot of things I miss about the city I left behind, car-dependent infrastructure is not one of them. I, like many people speaking here, am against the current plan to redefine the drive. If the goal of this redefinition is to make Chicago the Dallas, Texas of the Midwest, by all means, move ahead. Build another lane, continue to invest in car-dependent infrastructure, even as gas prices rise. Build huge heat zones and flood zones, even as environmental disasters get worse. But Dallas is not the only city we could emulate in the world. We could look to cities like Paris, who are investing in pedestrians, in people, in increasing the public's access to public spaces, into decreasing the temperatures of their cities, into increasing the available joy in a city. And if you are at all on the fence about how to move forward, I encourage you, go home and ask your loved ones. I'm thinking about going to Dallas, Texas, or Paris, France. Which one should I choose? Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Alex? Okay. Ellen Steinke and Nick Schrey. Ellen already spoke. Nick Schrey already went. Kyle Lucas. And then, oh, Claire already spoke. Claire Fogg. Bryce. Oh. Boyce. Kyle, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Lucas. I am the Executive Director of Better Street Chicago, and I'm here once again to encourage the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to not include the disastrous Redefine the Drive project in its regional transportation plan in its current form. I think it's really clear that the public is impassioned about this, and I think it's actually really frustrating the way that IDOT, for those who are on Zoom and can't see, IDOT's expressions on their faces as we are providing comment, because it is reflective of how they have treated the public for the last 13 years. Dismissive and not collaborative and not providing transparency. And I think it's really interesting that we're here today as CMAP has presented its climate action plan. Those of us who are in person were handed these little cards that has a nice graphic on it. It has a bike, it has people on the beach, it has a train. It does not have a highway. Why? Because we know that highways are the opposite of how we take action on the climate, and yet we are entertaining doubling down on the mistakes, the destructive mistakes of the 50s and the 60s that we know are bad. Why on earth, if DLSD wasn't there today, if you were proposing to put an 8-lane expressway down the lakefront, there would be riots in the streets. We're not here rioting today. We are here making our voices heard. We have been telling you that we want to work with you. Please help us work with you to chart forward the future that Chicagoans deserve. But if you do not work with us, we will fight. And we will continue to come here. We will march in the streets. We will win. So you can decide if you're going to win with us or if your legacy is going to be remembered as people who refused to be bold, refused to work with the people, and refused to build a better future for your children. That's what this is about. And I am sick and tired of all the horrors that are happening in the world right now that we have to fight you. Why do we have to fight you when there is a fascist in power right now? Why do I have to come here and give public comment about, please don't build an expressway on the lakefront? Please stop making me do that. I would much rather do other things with my time, but we will continue to do this because we know it is right. And I know you know it's right too. And so let's stop checking off boxes because we think it's what we have to do and change course. We can do that, but we won't do that if you refuse. So join us in doing the right thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We've got Boyce and then Dr. Chloe Groom and Chris Kadianis already went. So Boyce?
Hello, Boyce Outer Slice. I respect you not giving that a chance. It's a tough one. Yeah, I, like many other people, am against the Lakeshore Drive proposal. I think one of the important things that isn't really being talked about is like, what is the point of Lakeshore Drive? Like to bring people north and south? And is a highway the best way to do that? I think most of us here would say no. And that's why it's also a problem just for the transportation aspect of it, let alone the lake and the pollution. This morning I took the day off so I could be here to make a comment. And I treated myself this morning to a long run because I'm training for half marathon. Did I bother going to the lakefront to run? No. Like it's a hassle to get there. Even though once you're there, there's no cars, you're still hearing them. And you have to deal with getting there and getting home every time you go. So although it's there as a resource for all of us, I didn't even bother. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Thanks for giving us the time to speak and to share our opinions. It's really appreciated. Have a good Friday.
Thank you. Dr. Chloe Groom?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Chloe Groom, and I'd actually like to comment on the comprehensive action plan that was presented today. So a little variety. I have a PhD in materials science and engineering from UC Irvine. This is relevant because my doctoral research focused on minimizing rare earth metals that are necessary for catalytic converters and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. I collaborated extensively with world-class researchers on similar questions in this space. Something that the analysis presented today misses is that there is a huge supply chain limitation for the broad adoption of green vehicles. Electric vehicles require rare earth magnets for their engines to function. Currently, China controls 90% of the world's rare earth metal supply, and we have such a great relationship with them currently. Other sources are from extremely unstable economies, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo. There are speculative explorations into mining the seabed for additional rare earth metals with potentially catastrophic consequences for the environment. These catalysts, these clumps of rare earth metals help produce oxygen on the seafloor. So what would happen if we scraped all of that out? Even with these sources, for everyone to continue driving as much as they do today in an electric vehicle, the planet simply does not provide enough supply for costs to be at all reasonable. In short, we cannot consume our way out of the climate crisis. I would much prefer to see a comprehensive climate plan that focuses on land use. Chicagoans as households emit less than half as much as suburbanites. Connected places that have real access to transit, amenities, and abundant housing emit far less CO2. We cannot consume our way out of the climate crisis, but we can pedal, walk, and choo-choo our way out. Thank you.
Thank you. The hour being 11:54, we are close to the end of the 15-minute period. So as of 9:30 a.m. yesterday, which was 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting, we had received 281 emails of public comment with regards to the proposed redefined Lakeshore Drive project in the RTP. So all public comments received for this meeting will be kept on record and be available upon request. And written public comments received 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting will be captured in the meeting minutes. So in order to be considerate for everyone's time, I was hoping that we could entertain a motion to continue for an additional 15 minutes, but also provide the comments, limit the comments to 1 minute. Would there be a first or a second for that?
So moved. McHenry County.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so at this time, we're going to continue for another 15-minute period, but just in consideration, we still have 14 people to call on in Zoom, and then everyone else who's raised their hands online. We've got Laura Smetana and Seth Winnie on Zoom. Laura Smetana, you're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi. So I too am strongly opposed to advancing the Redefine the Drive project. I live and work and recreate in Chicago. I make use of the lakefront and utilize Lakeshore Drive on a daily basis. The Redefine the Drive plan as it's currently designed directly contradicts with CMAP's own reports and research, many of which we've heard about today. To cite just a few of the examples, CMAP's own reporting clearly states that an understanding of long-standing research showing that widening lane widths, straightening the road, adding driving lanes, introducing more expressway type features as a means to decrease car driving is only going to induce more car traffic, counterproductive to the end goal. In addition to the climate challenges that other people have referenced, the safe system approach says, quote, "We need to shift traffic safety culture, reduce excessive speeds, enhance safety." The Redesign the Drive project does not align with that. Restoring Lakeshore Drive to a true boulevard, not creating a super highway, would better align with the CMAP's own priorities. And finally, the mobility
Excuse me,
report.
that's 1 minute.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to cut you off. Thank you.
Seth Winnie is next, and then Courtney Cobbs after. Seth, are you present?
Yes. Hello.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for your time. Just wanted to add that I'm opposed to adding Pine Drive to the train list. I concur with lots that's been said already on the subject, and it's 20th century solution, 21st century problem, and it's not supported by the people who will impact the most. Thanks.
Thank you, Seth. We have Courtney Cobbs and then Heather and Garland Armstrong to follow. Courtney, are you present? Courtney Cobbs? Okay, we're going to move on to Heather Armstrong.
Hi, it's her husband, Garland. Heather is asleep, but I just would like to know when y'all are going to upgrade for the Lakeshore Drive because I think there's some deterioration of it, so they can make sure what's the brand new part going to be. And I'm also just wanting to make sure for Lynette to make sure for Metra the 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 crossings like the flashing signals at different stations. When is that project going to be up and running? So, and the target date completion of it.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Garland. Our best to you and Heather.
All right.
Ian Horvath, Andrea Anderson, and Nathan Bean. Ian, are you present?
Hello, yes, I'm present. Are you hearing me okay?
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree with all that's been said in opposition to the current Lakeshore Drive plan, and would like to see, something more transit, pedestrian, bike friendly. I don't see the gain in throwing away the Lakeshore for some kind of, momentary gain and throughput and reduction in congestion. That's just going to be nullified when induced demand kicks in. So that just feels like an antiquated notion to me, and I'd like to see a different direction for this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Andrea Anderson. Andrea. Okay, we have Nathan Bean, then Cole Rogers, and then Dr. Luke Leisman. Nathan Bean?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I don't see many cups of coffee around y'all. I don't know how you're doing this. So I appreciate everything that you guys are doing, but I do want to, again, roll your eyes. It's totally fine, but redefine the drive. I ran for public office for the 44th Ward 4 years ago, and in 2020, we were talking about we need a light rail, we need high-speed bus routes or rapid transit routes on Lakeshore Drive. This is something we've been hearing for like 6 years. And so I really want to emphasize we can get this done by working together. And I know a lot of you have probably been working on this a lot. Thank you, but let's improve it. And I just want to emphasize Chloe's comments, Kyle's comments, Liz in the chat. Appreciate all of you for all you all do when it comes to this. And I really just, again, let's get this done, you guys. We can do it together. Better Lakeshore Drive for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole Rogers.
Hi, I'm a Northside resident. I will keep this quick. I want to say the majority of Northside aldermen have opposed this, or the redefine the drive proposal. The majority of the community opposes it. It does not benefit Chicagoans who do not own cars. And the project should be rejected until it is recreated as something other than a highway, like a road, or a mixed transit development. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Luke Leisman, and then Hunter Homans and Maddie Caldwell after that.
Hello, my name is Dr. Luke Leisman, and I'm a resident of Chicago's North Side who frequently bikes by the Lakeshore, also drives on North Lakeshore Drive, and I'm also here to speak against Redefine the Drive. In short, I think Redefine the Drive, as currently stated, demonstrably goes against everything that CMAP purports to stand for. It's not part of a transportation system that works for everyone. It's already been stated that a third of drivers in the state of Illinois don't have driver's license, or a third of people in Illinois don't have driver's licenses. I'd like to know how this design works for them. And even personally, as a car driver, you might think I stand to benefit from the project, but study after study shows that changes like are proposed only serve to increase traffic, and that the way to make things better for car drivers is to invest in alternate ways for people to get around. And I think that's a point that isn't spoken about enough. So far from a transportation system that works better for everyone, as stated, I think this project is a transportation system that works for no one. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Hunter Homans available online? Hunter? Next is Josu Guevara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josue Guevara, Chicago resident here, also trying to speak about the Redefine the Drive project. I believe that CMAP should not advance this project in its current form against the wishes of the community, advocates, transit leaders, local elected officials, and the Illinois General Assembly until it has been re-scoped to meet their concerns. A city like Chicago, at a moment like this, where big infrastructure projects are planned, should look at the future to build the city that we want to have, and not continue doubling down on failed infrastructure designs that have brought us to this point. We currently have a dangerous, highly polluting, high-speed highway obstructing access to the best, most beautiful natural resource the city and its residents have. Around the world, cities have realized that prioritizing public transit and people over personal motorized vehicle speeds improves the standard of living of all residents and the experience visitors can have. This project needs to be refocused to have a less dangerous boulevard and not a highway where transit can be used for most trips while providing friendly access to the lakefront. This is the opportunity to have a bold vision and design the next historical Chicago project that generations to come can be proud of. No one will be proud of a highway next to the lakefront, and I don't want to have to explain that to my grandkids. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the number of people, the public comment that was received in advance of the meeting. We will continue with Zoom participants in the order the hand was raised. Next is Henry Firth.
Hello, thanks for this opportunity to provide public comment. My comment is relating to the CMAP travel demand model. I think it makes problematic assumptions around vehicle cost and perceived disutility. For example, in my own analysis, the model assumes that operating costs of an automobile are 15 cents when AAA reports them as 75 cents. And it assumes average parking costs of 50 cents per trip, when we all know parking is way more expensive than that. And I think this is a core reason why the projected mode shift of even the most transit-friendly proposals in the Redefine the Drive project said that there would be less than 3% mode shift. I suspect that is significantly low. And if that is used as a basis for these designs, I think the designs are invalid and they need to be discarded and updated with better modeling that reflects reality and not used as a justification to spend billions of dollars against the public will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kaylin Luciano.
Hi there, I'm Cal Luciano. I live in Lakeview, about 1 block away from Lakeshore Drive. So this issue about Redefine the Drive is really relevant for me. And I'm asking CMAP not to move forward with the current form and join my neighbors opposing this plan. This proposed plan just locks in a highway that prioritizes speed over safety, access, and CMAP's own climate action plan. For safety, I know that one of the biggest issues that we see on Inner Lakeshore Drive is how many crashes occur there every year, and we know that is a result of poor roadway design. So locking in another highway will not only harm thousands of residents who want to walk, bike, roll to the lakefront, but also to drivers. And I don't think that is being considered. And then I just think it's uh, crazy ironic that we are presenting about the climate action plan from CMAP and then still trying to lock in this Lakeshore Drive plan that will pollute our air, contribute to emissions from car travel, which is a bulk of emissions for the city, and just goes against the plan. So just once again, asking CMAP not to follow through with this and to reconsider redefine the drive to change it to a boulevard that benefits our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Next is Gavin Chuck.
Thank you. I'm Gavin Chuck. I'm a resident of Chicago. I urge CMAP to pause the current IDOT plans for Lakeshore Drive. I was excited when the process was opened up for public input several years ago, but bitterly disappointed that IDOT now proposes a plan that essentially ignores that input and preserves the current highway. Simply put, their final proposal fails to redefine the drive. Using the word redefine in reference to their plan feels like propaganda. A truly redefined Lakeshore Drive must account for the needs of pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users as they go about their lives, not just car drivers. IDOT's plan is extremely imbalanced towards car use. Our infrastructure must be human scale. 8 lanes of highway is not human scale. Pedestrian access points spaced half a mile apart are not human scale. Loud continual noise from high traffic speed traffic is not human scale. CMAP has the power to include and amplify the voices of citizens who have long wanted to actually redefine the drive. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to design an infrastructure that maximizes the benefits of our unique landscape and culture. Please do not advance.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Brandon Bell.
Hi, my name is Brandon Bell. I'm a resident of Uptown in Chicago. I am also speaking out against Redefine the Drive as proposed. I'll spare a lot of the other comments that have been made and just talk about my personal experience. Living and working along the lakeshore. When I take my dog to the dog park at Lawrence and Lakeshore, there's a constant roar of traffic going by. When I go to the beach with my friends, there's a constant roar of traffic. It's also difficult to access these resources, even though I live in a very developed part of the city with very limited green space. The green space we are given is next to an 8-lane highway, and it's hard for us to reach without going to some access point that's way out of the way. I also worry sometimes when I'm running or biking along the lakefront, there aren't barriers between me and cars going 60 plus miles an hour. What if one of them goes off the road? It happens quite often. It just happened recently. What happens if someone gets hit and dies? There's no need for that. The way this is set up now makes zero sense. It's not good for anyone who lives in the city. And it's really not that great for people who commute. I commute sometimes by car downtown to go to work. I work odd shifts at a hospital. I would
Thank you
like
for
better
your comment.
options.
Thank you for your comment.
With the hour being 12:10 p.m., We are at the end of the 15-minute comment period. We do have 6 more people online who are waiting to provide their comments. So at this time, I'd like to ask the committee if if anyone would like to submit a motion to extend the meeting by another 15 minutes for the public comment period. Thank you, Megan, and thank you for the second, Mary. All right, we can move on to.
Well, in quick discussion,
Yes,
if there
Henry.
are other written comments, can CMAP go ahead and summarize those at the next meeting, right? That'll accommodate beyond these 6.
Yes.
Of course.
Okay, moving on, the next speaker.
Nora Getz.
Hello, my name is Nora Getz. I'm a resident of Lincoln Square in Chicago. I want to say that I agree with the other commenters on the opposition to the redefine the drive plan as it stands. A lot of them said better what I could say about my reasons for opposing it. But I want to add that a lot of our elected representatives, including unanimously passed at HR 438 in the Illinois General Assembly, was also against the redefine the drive, as well as the vast majority of Lakeshore area aldermen in the city of Chicago. So I feel like it doesn't make sense to have a board that isn't elected make decisions against people who we did vote for in terms of going against this redefine the drive plan. Instead, I feel like a better plan for Lakeshore Drive would be to turn it into a boulevard, maybe add some like exclusive bus lanes, perhaps even turning it to light rail. Or if we wanted to allocate the money somewhere completely different, I would like to suggest that we invest that instead into through running of metro trains through downtown, as outlined in buildthetunnelchicago.org. I encourage everyone to look at the website to see what's possible to really improve our climate and transit standing instead of turning our lakefront into an 8-lane highway. Again, that's buildthetunnelchicago.org, and I hope that
Thank
y'all
you.
take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Sanjay Kumar.
Hey everyone, thank you for having this public comments out here. I am, like many people here, I am here to in opposition to the current version of the Lakeshore Drive redefine the drive proposal. We should have a boulevard system instead of a highway system. This is a big safety issue as well. We know that speed is the #1 reason that accidents become fatal. And we know that when people are coming off of Lakeshore Drive or going onto Lakeshore Drive, they are going faster than they are on regular city streets. As an uptown resident, that directly affects the safety of me and my community. And so I would urge CMAP and IDOT to put in a boulevard system instead, something that is much more climate friendly and safer.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Simone Surrey.
Good afternoon, Simone Surrey. I am a resident of the Southport Corridor and a 6 times a week user of the Lakeshore Path. I wanted to politely request that CMAP revisit the assumptions as well as the welfare of Chicagoans as they look at this once in a lifetime opportunity to really make this city a lot better. We really need something that does not function as a highway right next to one of our most beautiful assets. We also don't need something that's going to prioritize cars over people. We need something that's safer. We need better access to the lake. We need integration of that Lakeshore Path into our communities, not something that acts as a barrier. I would also argue that the city has made a lot of great strides to be more human-centric, to reduce pollution, to make the city more friendly, livable, and somewhere where people want to stay and where more people want to live. So let's continue with that progress and revisit what we can do with the Lakeshore, because again, this is truly a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we should really take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for your comment. Next is Adam Vogel.
Hey, I will keep it short in consideration of everyone's time. Continuously investing in these highway projects and road expansions massively increases our liabilities in the public budget, and I don't want my property taxes continuing to go up to be spent on these things. I don't want your property taxes going up to be spent on these things. So yeah, just adding my voice to the opposition of this redefine the drive plan.
Thank you, Adam. Next is Neville Hemming.
Hi, everybody. My name is Neville Hemming. My family and I live in Edgewater in Chicago, less than a mile from the drive. I am a co-founder of the Neighbors of Edgewater and Uptown, a grassroots group of neighbors working for a walkable, transit-oriented, housing-rich community. Edgewater and Uptown make up 2 of the 6 community areas along the northern lakefront. It's great to see many of our members on this call today expressing their extreme opposition to the current plan. Edgewater and Uptown are not car dependent. About 40% of households don't have a car, including my own. Only a third of us drive to work. And yet, at the Hollywood terminus in Edgewater, around 70,000 cars per day enter and exit the drive, more than double the number of cars in Edgewater itself. This road is simply not serving us. It is serving regional cut-through traffic while imposing noise, air pollution, and safety impacts on our neighborhoods. We invested in new red line stations in our community, transit funding at the state level, parking reform at the city level, and more housing near transit. And yet this plan doubles down on a highway through the middle of a park. Last I checked, we lived in Illinois, not Texas or Florida. For over a decade, the public has asked for transit, safe biking, and real access
Thank you for your comment.
Instead, IDOT has systematically ignored our communities and continued to advance the Highway First plan. You need to reject this immediately and go back to the drawing board.
Thank you for your comment.
No cars on the lakefront. We do not want this.
Thank you, Neville. Next is Matthew Truskowski.
Hi, all. In this meeting, we have spoken about the importance of our transportation budget as well as our climate action plan. One obvious strategy for both of these is to reduce our expenditures which subsidize private vehicular traffic, which is the least efficient common form of transportation, both for expense and environmental impact. Pressingly, an obvious example of this is the possible expansion and widening of Lakeshore Drive, which is antithetical to both of these goals. Even if such a project were funded entirely by outside sources, it would still increase the maintenance burden of our roadway infrastructure, which is a part of our unsustainable transportation MO. We are at a point where transportation options other than driving are important for the above reasons, and that these options are heavily in demand, as we can see with all the comments that we have here today. So all projects, including Redefine the Drive, should work towards those goals, not against them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Daniel Stryker is next.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name is Daniel Stryker. I live in Lakeview. We need improvements for people walking, riding, and using transit at the expense of the highway blighting our lakefront, not the other way around. One thing that hasn't been touched on so much is that this plan doesn't increase capacity of the already severely, by current standards, overburdened bike and pedestrian trails. 2 people can't ride side by side without creating a safety issue for themselves or others. That should be able to happen with room for somebody to pass. A crowded lakefront trail is just about as stressful a riding situation as I get in when I need to commute. The plan also makes the trail harder to reach by pedestrians on foot in some locations and adds hills that make the bike route less accessible and place bikers right next to the noise of Lakeshore Drive with no mitigation. When we ask for improvements to walking, to safety, to inner Lakeshore Drive, we're told we have to wait for Redefine the Drive because that's where the funding is for those things. But Redefine the Drive is neglecting all of that at the expense of a highway that it seems nobody wants. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So we have concluded the comments online, and as as a reminder, we have received over 281 emails of public comment in regards to the proposed Redefine the Lakeshore Drive project in the regional transportation plan. So with the time being close to 12:20, in the remaining time, we're just going to summarize the emails that were provided, and our co-chair, Scott, is going to provide that summary for us.
you. So the letter states, Dear Aaron Alamon and Anthony Napolitano, I urge you not to advance the Redefine the Drive project in CMAP's upcoming regional transportation plan. This deeply flawed project has faced overwhelming opposition from community members as well as elected officials and needs to be sent back to the drawing board. The premise of the project from the beginning has fundamentally rejected public input, which has shown an overwhelming majority of residents want investments in transit and a reduction in the impact of the drive on the lakefront. This desire was represented in HR 438, which passed unanimously in the Illinois General Assembly, calling for the drive to be made a true boulevard and for public investments in transit. The majority of Chicago's alderpeople who represent the North Lakefront had made calls for the same. Despite this, the Illinois and Chicago Departments of Transportation have flouted these calls for better and presented plans with no improvements in transit and locking in a superhighway for the next 100 years of Chicagoans. It would be profoundly irresponsible for the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to do the same. Given the historic investment in transit the Illinois General Assembly has just made, paired with dramatic changes to our regional planning for transit, it's time that CMAP hit reset on this project. Sincerely, President.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you to everyone who attended in person today for the public comment, as well as those who joined us online. This does conclude the public comment section of the agenda. Moving on to item 9.0, the next meeting is scheduled for May 29th, 2026, which I think is just after Memorial Day or before, after. So next item, seeing no other business before the committee, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Kane County.
Second, Illinois Tollway.
Second by Illinois Tollway. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.